the work session for Tuesday, January the 14th, 2025, the first meeting of 2025 to order. We're going to call the roll. Alderman Barnhill.
Present.
Alderman Blanton.
Here.
Alderman Caesar. Absent. Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Present.
Alderman Brown.
Present.
Vice Mayor Potts.
Present.
And Alderman Baggett.
Present.
And the mayor is here also. The next item is for opportunity for citizens to make comments on items that are not on the agenda tonight. I have three speakers. I'd ask them to go ahead and line up at the podium. You have 2 minutes each. I have Mike Ingram, Steve Eiler, and Patrick Collins. Line up, please, and we'll go from there.
Capital thing over here.
You're welcome to sit there and turn on the green button too if you want to,
Get the
Mike.
capital. How do I get the capital thing off here?
Whichever one's
We're
easy.
trying to do that. No.
You didn't try to. There you
Oh, it's, I has
I
to,
just saw you do it.
yeah, I didn't know. I thought it was.
Hit the
it was
green
lit up.
button
It was
there, or the
capital.
button. Thank you, Mike. Go ahead.
Okay, my name's Mike Ingram. 2 years ago, I was asked to take over as president of the Arts Council of Williamson County, which I've done. And it was right after COVID. We had no members as far as artists, our businesses. And since that time, things have really taken off. We've been showing 40 or 50 artists at each art crawl. We have about 40 participating places. The factory's now on board with the art crawl. So I'm very pleased with the progress we made. I've been an artist my entire life. I taught school. I taught art for 39 years. I've been involved in hundreds of art festivals. And, the art crawl is the main thing we do with the Arts Council. And we've gotten past the problem with the alcohol, I hope. The chief of police had sent everybody a thing saying no alcohol on the streets, but some people were taking it out of the stores onto the street. And hopefully we've got that under control. We've got signs in all the stores. A few months ago, Twine had hired 2 musicians. And they were playing in front of Twine right across the street here. And the police came and shut them down. They said they were too loud. You can't have music if you can hear it more than 50 feet away. Every festival I've ever been involved with had music. We're 14 miles from Nashville, Tennessee. It just amazes me that people don't want to hear music on Main Street. But I know it's been suggested to me that we get some kind of a permit, but that would be like $1,500 a month by the time we get the permit and pay the police and everything. I don't want to shut down Main Street. I don't think we need police patrolling. It's a mostly older crowd. So what I would like for you to think about today, how could we still have some music and not offend people and not have to spend $1,500 a month?
Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
That magical tone indicates your time is up.
I think I made an error filling out the cards. If item 4 is about the Mills Creek Basin project.
We'll call you back then.
That's what we wish to speak about.
Okay, thank you. And Patrick Collins?
That was me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Eiler and myself.
Both of you?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I've added you to the list.
Mayor, I got a question on the initial public comment. I know that the city administrator had been looking into this, and a couple of aldermen had inquired about this. Is there an update on that, or is there something we can provide?
Well, he covered it well. We're talking about state law about open container on public streets. This event does operate outside of a city special event. They don't come to us for a permit, which is fine, but we just need to make sure those are followed and encouraged by what he said, and that's our understanding as well. In terms of the amplification, I think you all know the background on that in terms
do.
of that distance, and that is without a permit. Now, what we'll look into is just strictly an amplification arrangement, which is something I don't think gets us into the special event realm. So that's what I'm going to follow up on.
And that permit, I wouldn't think would be $1,500 a month.
It is not $1,500 to amplify.
My understanding when we changed those amplification rules that with a permit ahead of time and notice, That way we wouldn't have 5 people out there
Right.
amplifying at the same time. So I feel like this is one of those where maybe we could work on that.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. I don't want to speak without, because I didn't
Sure,
know the issue.
understand.
So I want to be careful to not get in front of it too far without talking to our experts, but that's my thought as well. That is really amplification without a permit.
Right.
And one of the things we've said is amplification beyond that distance just triggers a permit because you're starting to dominate the public space.
Right.
Either with number of people or amplification, and that's the way we would look at this. And so our team will look at that and see what we can do to address that specifically.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 1 is Resolution 2024-111, a resolution acknowledging the letter of agreement between the Tennessee Main Street Program and Downtown Franklin Association. I don't see anybody from Main Street.
We do this every
program.
year. It's part of just supporting and acknowledging the Main Street program, which has been puts a focal point on economic vitality in a downtown area. And obviously, that's worked very well over the years in downtown Franklin. So we're glad to be a part of that.
Item 2 is Capital Investment Plan Financial Model.
So Michael's coming up here. We want to run through for you an update of the model that supports our capital investment program, the 10-year program. We have looked at an updated capacity based on some modifications of some projects, but we also wanted to look at the revenue structure, given both the update that you did with road impact fees and just kind of a reevaluation of long-term assumptions that were made, especially related to our sales tax component that's dedicated to supporting the capital investment program. So Michael's going to take you through that. The good news is we have an updated capacity, and then we'll talk a little bit at the end about how you want to proceed with looking at the allocation. You did some prioritization, but with this new number, we may want to take a look at how we look at assigning that to some of the projects you've been considering. So, Michael, take it away.
Thank you, Eric. Mr. Mayor, members of the board, good evening. Michael Walters-Young, your Chief Budget and Performance Officer. This evening, we're going to spend a few minutes giving you an update to our financial model, 10 years from fiscal 25 through 34 for our capital investment plan. A few items of note to set the agenda item. Number 1, in your packets, you have 2 attachments, the PowerPoint, which I will be referring to, and a small 62-page updated financial model. This model consists of 3 main components. Number 1, executive summaries that give an idea as to how much money we've raised over the last 8 to 10 years, as well as how much money we would believe we would take in year over year, revised debt scenarios, etc. Number 2 is a 10-year forecast of each revenue source, so general fund, road impact, facilities tax, parkland, etc. And number 3 are updates to the approved capital projects as per Resolution 2024-46, the last time you updated the approved list of projects. It does not include recently ranked CIP projects which you have had interest of adding. Those have not been officially voted by you at this time, so the idea here is to give you an update on how much additional capacity you have to potentially afford those projects which are not yet approved. All right? So the 10-year CIP includes the following funds and/or funding sources. You have the general fund, which is made up of tax revenues both from the property and sales tax. You have the sanitation fund, the road impact fund, the 2 facilities tax funds, the stormwater fund, the hotel motel fund, the parkland dedication fund, and the water management fund. Those are what we call internal sources to the city of Franklin because they are appropriated and accounted for by us. You also have federal and state grants, as well as private contributions and utility contributions. It's the money available when utility lines need to be relocated, but it's not on our dime, but done as part of a CIP project. The largest single source, not surprisingly, is the general fund. There are 4 components that comprise this 10-year amount. Number 1 and largest is the capital funding account. Created as per Resolution 2014-64, it formally specifies, as you can see on the screen in the yellow box, because you won't be able to read the numbers because they're too small on the screen. This is a page which appears in your annual operating budget, and it shows you the entire fund balance of the general fund, broken out as per your policy. As a quick reminder, your general fund policy includes the following. The first 33% are held in reserve, and they are specified for various contingencies on the screen. The second, from 33 to 45% of annual revenues, is what we call the supplemental reserve account. That's for any additional contingencies which may come up, read economic, that we would need to stabilize operations. And everything over 45% of the general fund is available to fund capital. It is that amount which is referred to herein and throughout the rest of the presentation. At the end of fiscal '24, that amount was $33.8 million. The second component is 0.5% local option sales tax. If we go back now, it turns out, amazingly, it's been nearly 7 years since that ballot initiative went before the voters of Franklin. The sales tax was raised to the state maximum of 9.75%. Of that, we have taken the money that we receive annually, half of it goes to operations, and half of it goes to fund capital projects. So when you approve your annual operating budget, you end up having a large transfer to capital projects. This case in fiscal '25 would be in the range of about $6.9 million. $5.7 million is the 1/2 of that additional sales tax revenues. The other $5.7 million goes into operations. The second part of that is 1/2 of the property tax revenues, which were generated from the former TIF district that surrounded the Nissan property. That was retired several years ago. The money no longer needed to service the TIF bonds. Half goes into the capital projects fund, half goes to support operations. On the screen, you can see that we would forecast roughly $112 million in cash over the next 10-year period. The blue is the existing capital funding account as of June 30th, 2024, and between $7 to $9 million a year from those funding sources that I just described between the sales tax and the property tax. There are two funds with no assumed revenue in this 10-year forecast. Those are the Sanitation Fund and the Stormwater Fund. Sanitation Fund is designed as an operational fund to simply support ongoing the operations of the Sanitation Environmental Services Fund. And the Stormwater Fund, those fees were raised within the last 5 years, but they support ongoing operations, and there's not sufficient fund balance being generated to support capital projects. There are five funds which are development and tourist related. Here's where I get to break out the disclaimers. These revenue forecasts, just like in the revenue model that our management fellow presented to Budget and Finance Committee last Thursday, are highly dependent upon when development activity occurs. Thus, because of this fact, we are very conservative in how we forecast future revenues. Second, these, of course, are funds that can only be used for capital projects, not for operations. Third, the amounts included within this financing model have 10% taken away to maintain compliance with state comptroller's requirements for minimum fund balance levels. So you'll see a deduct in the detailed sheets. City facilities tax assumes roughly $2.5 million a year. In fiscal '24, the amount of revenues raised were $2.9 million for the fiscal year that just closed. The annual average over the last 25 years has been $3.3 million. The county facilities fund assumes roughly $700,000 to $800,000 a year. That is in line with the last 10 years worth of collections on an annual basis. The hotel motel tax fund, we collected $6.7 million in the previous fiscal year that closed June 30th. Hotel motel occupancy fund, it should be reminded, is an occupancy tax levied on all hotel and motel and Vrbo stays. The current tax rate is at a 4% of room stays of a maximum 5% allowed to you under authorization. There is actually no legal restriction on how these funds can be spent, but we have historically only spent them on tourist-related activities and or recreation projects that have a link to tourism. Supporting debt service and our 1% annual contribution to fund the Convention and Visitors Bureau on behalf of the City of Franklin. Parkland Dedication Fund, this amount only shows on an annual basis the amount that we would get, that we estimate to get in the 25% which is guaranteed to come to the city. The other 75% of parkland dedication funds that are paid at this time are eligible for offsets back to developers, depending upon the type of permit that was pulled and when it was pulled and how it was pulled. Last year, we collected roughly $4.18 million in fiscal '24. We're assuming slightly over $1 million per year each year in the forecast. The final development-related fund is the Road Impact Fund. Detailed on page 16 and approved by the board with modifications on ordinance 2023-41. If you remember, we did a few scenarios on possible revenues that could be raised based upon what activity had occurred. From that model, we were, what we believe, appropriately conservative. We had forecast roughly the maximum of $170 million based upon the scenario that you ended up voting, which was a 6-year grandfathering and a phase-in. We have taken only 60% of that moving forward. So roughly $100 million a year. Off of that $100 million a year, we also have taken away the annual expenses for debt service payments through 2032, as well as at least $1 million for road impact offset agreements, because those certainly will continue. The current budget is $3 million. We are showing $1 million in some of those outer years. The total result is roughly $99 million, almost $100 million over the 10-year window. I wanted to make very clear, though, that of the scenarios that we've shown you that were ranged between 170 to 230, there's only $99 million in this financial model. And I hope that that tempers certainly some of the questions regarding what future may come regarding development activity.
Just before we get off that, can you, how does that relate, if you were to compare that with, I know in the, you did a 10-year look back too, or a 5-year look back. Is that like on par with what we've collected? How far, what's the delta between like that expectation and what we've collected? Does that make sense? Historically.
It does.
And if you don't have the answer, happy to get it later. That's fine.
It would be best for me to get you the
That's
detail
fine.
later.
Thank you.
On page 6 of the detailed model, you have the net amount of revenues which are available from fiscal 25 through 24 in the Road Impact Fund. And that has steadily increased. But again, for example, we had $10.5 million in collections of road impact this past year. Sometimes it's as low as 4 million, sometimes it's as high as 12 million. Because it's so highly dependent, you can have steady development activity, but if the developments which are pulling permits don't pay road impact funds or fees, because some don't, you're not necessarily going to have similar collections year over year. And that is why you saw, as we did the look back and all the analysis we did with road impact fees, that's why you saw some years which were very high and some years which were lower. And that's why we stressed the need to try to take an annual average when doing forecasting.
Well, why would that be then if they didn't pay the road impact fees? Is because the development wasn't significant enough or was not impacting?
Well, not every development would necessarily be eligible, depending upon the type of
Yeah,
development.
the type and the size and.
Correct. Right.
Alderman Barnhill.
I want to make sure that I understand, when we did that road impact fee study, whatever, it was $231 million on the table that we could have done if we had not done phase 5, 6, 4, whatever it was. So and it came down 60-something million, down to 170. And now you're using 100 million available for the projects that we think we need to do based upon 60%. And I have no problem with 60%. That's just a number that you picked out. Mm-hmm. You could pick that 70. Mm-hmm. You could pick that 80. You could pick that 50 if you wanted to. But that ties our hands in doing what we probably need to do. And that's roads, traffic, the issues that we're facing. Mm-hmm. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not uncomfortable with the number. I'm uncomfortable with the amount of the number, because it should have not been 100 million. It should have been more than that. And anyone and everyone sitting in here, this is not something that you're going to pay. This is future development that's paying. It's not you. I'm not asking for an increase on road impact fees so that I can dig against every person in the city of Franklin. This is future development that we're talking about right here. And I personally don't think they're paying their share. And I voted that way a month ago, whatever it was. I don't think they're paying their share when we're coming in and showing $100 million to fund our capital improvements projects. Help fund, doesn't fund it. That won't build the last leg of Mac Hatcher. So, that's just a parting thought.
We are trying to be fairly consistent in how we look at it. We're pretty conservative. We use it as a cash source. There's an older debt service that's still tied to that fund, but since in the 16 years I've been here, we've used it as a cash source as going forward, and that's still our philosophy. And we've always used a pretty conservative number overall, and then it really gets reconciled as we update the plan each time because we look at what we really receive and we update the budgets accordingly. So what really comes in ultimately gets poured into capital projects. It's just not wanting to get beyond what we know we have reasonable expectation of receiving, so that we know we can deliver on the projects you all select. So it's sort of a assumption choice, and so if you want to be more aggressive, we can look at that. We feel that this is pretty consistent with how we've looked at it over time. We are making a fairly significant adjustment to it over time, so we wanted to stay on the conservative side. It is a cash resource, but that is an assumption. We can give you some other numbers on just to give you a sense of what it might look like and how it might impact a 10-year plan.
The final item for funding, as sort of summarized, water management, federal and state grants, private contributions, and utility contributions are simply the amounts that we estimate per specific project. So if there's a need to relocate a water line or a sewer line that's part of a road project, we have that amount plugged in. For East McEwen Phase 4, we have $30 million of federal grants, which are included. The summaries and numbers which are included in this model for the 20-plus projects which are remaining to complete in the CIP are gross numbers. So you have a city contribution amount, and then you have all of these other financial sources within there.
Gross amount.
That's correct.
Is Maze Creek in there?
So
Sorry, ma'am.
it's a gross amount. We've kind of always gone
Yeah.
back and forth on
Yep.
this. So help us understand exactly how and maybe this might be the next meeting where we take this number you're about to show us, what we can do, and how we account for some of that. And because to Alderman Barnell's point, we don't want to leave money on the, projects off the board if
Sure.
yeah.
So for the available resources for the next 10 years as of January 14th, 2025, we are forecasting almost $525 million in revenues. That breaks down as you see on the screen. But one of the indicators that we look at and we try to maintain, we've always tried to maintain, is being able to spend more on cash for projects than borrowing. Now, there's no magic rhyme, rule, or reason for this. Obviously, you don't want to borrow more than you can afford to repay. We have targeted 50-50 as a bottom line ratio. This, given the increases, given the modifications in our forecasts, and there are increases, I'm about to detail those in a second, in many revenue sources compared to where we were. But certainly the vote you made to raise road impact fees, that's the largest single shift from financing through debt and financing more in cash. They are specified on the screen, as in you see they are divided between the internal and the external funds. The external, again, are the specific federal, state, local grant or grant opportunities, utilities, and private contributions.
I had a question on this in my email to you last night. So you're saying our guideline has been 50%, and this board set that prior to the board alderman.
Yeah, we've
50%, paying 50% cash.
We've done
on
different iterations of this plan, obviously, over the years, and I think it's been close to 50-50 at times. The general direction was that's about where the comfort line was at the time. I think the previous version of this was more 60-40, with 60 being on the cash side, 40 on the debt side. So it's really our best estimate. There are certain sources, like I referred to, road impact, that lend themselves to being cash sources because they're inconsistent in what you get in any given year. So it'd be questionable to build a debt service schedule around it. So those lend themselves to cash sources, but it is certainly something we can look at and modify and look at a different assumption on debt. But it also sort of aligns with the type of revenue sources that we're identifying for specific projects too. So there's a little bit of macro and a little bit of micro to it if you
The reason I ask is because if that's higher than our, I mean, it is higher, and the citizens of Franklin should be thrilled that the city of Franklin is paying planning to pay 66% cash for all the capital investment projects. That's honestly exceptional, pay as you go. But our maximum debt service payment, I believe, was in it's probably the next slide, one of the slides. It definitely was in the detail. And you take, 1 or 2 or 3% on that cash, can make a difference in that payment and still be reasonable. And to Alderman Barnhill's point, get more projects done. When you take that in combination with the sandbagging we did on the other, again, I think the goal would be to maximize and make sure we get projects started. Sometimes that cash, what's the magic number, 66 or is it 60? And how does that make our capacity to do more projects more feasible?
We have tried to show and to use debt, obviously in a very responsible manner. So you will note that this forecast, and we'll detail it here in a second, assumes about $10 million to even $18, $19 million less debt than we had in one iteration. We had assumed $195 million borrowing. And with the projects that you have approved, key point, we feel comfortable that we can lower that to $176 million. That's a shift. And I will tell you that the vast majority of that delta is made up with increased expected road impact fees, because the road projects can be paid for with that cash source now, and we wouldn't have to borrow as much. So, but the changes, since you last saw this in June, are as on the screen here. We had a projected financing of about $100 million less. Road impact fees are the vast majority of that. It's 3/4 of the increase, or $77 million more. General fund cash is roughly $20 million more. That simply comes back to the fact that we changed the assumption. We had been assuming a annual collection of the 50% of the sales tax at $4.2 million, because that's what it was in 2021. It was about $8.4 million a year. Well, that's now $5.7 million. And that right there is $15 million more per year in that one source, because we are collecting more sales tax than we were even 3 years ago. The other one is hotel motel tax. That has remained very strong. We have increased that. Parkland dedication has been stronger, so that's roughly $750,000 more per year. And then you see the reductions. There's less stormwater, water, sewer, and then there's that reduction of $18.9 million in debt. Okay. But let's talk debt. So detailed on page 8, the $176 million is detailed in 4 potential bond issuances. You're going to hear more about one very shortly. But we would look at issuing debt potentially in each of the next 4 fiscal years, 25, 26, 27, 28. Those would be for major projects that you know of. Southeast Park, McEwen Phase 4 will have some in the upcoming issuance. New City Hall, Long Lane Overpass, and several others as we look at going out. On the screen, you see what that would do to your debt curve for the next 10 years. The current annual debt service is $15.8 million. That would grow to a peak of $28.2 million per year in fiscal 29. The existing debt service then would start to decline beginning in 2030. The green bars are the new debt service you would be taking on and how it would play out as you move forward. The blue bars are your existing debt service. What we have been mindful of for 20 years or 15 years since the large bonds were issued is where you see that blue really start to drop, because once you get to 2031, that existing debt service starts to taper off rather significantly. In the minds of financial planners, we like to kind of keep that captured. And so that's why you see that red line very thinly going across of your existing debt service. You already have made the adjustments within your budgets to accommodate that amount. And so we want to make sure it's prudent to fill that with more debt service to fund the capital projects that you need. Because in essence, you don't know that it's not there anyway because it's going to service those projects.
And the debt we plan to issue later this year is the first general obligation debt that the city has issued in the last 6 years. So just, again, to that theme earlier that we use debt strategically, we use it conservatively, we use it wisely. But it matches up with these long-term projects too, to use that as at least an element in the financing strategy. So the debt we issue, again, will be the first we've done in 6 years and on the general obligation side.
So I want to give you a quick sort of comparison update on the expense side before we close out tonight. All totaled via resolution 2024-46, the current total expenses estimated or actualized of the 36 approved projects is roughly $447.1 million, of which 14 projects have been completed. Those are on the screen in green. They range from Franklin Road to various major road resurfacing, Fire Station 7, the joint project with the Franklin Special School District, and on down the line. There are 5 projects which are currently under construction: Bicentennial Park, the ongoing home raising project with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the main barn restoration at Harlansdale, the bundled bridges and reconstruction contract, rehabilitation and construction contract, and improvements to Jordan Road. There are 4 projects which are in the right-of-way acquisition and bidding phase, and somewhat construction, truth be told. The largest is the Southeast Municipal Complex, Southeast Park, Phase 1 at $64.8 million. East McEwen Drive, Phase 4 at $55.3 million. Lockwood Glen, or Robinson Lake, as we'd refer to it, as $15.6 million. And then the initial construction and modification of sidewalk on Lewisburg to Collins Farm at $4.2 million.
And those 3 are really, you've already awarded the bid for Southeast Park Phase 1 and for East McEwen Phase 4. And then on the 28th, we'll have a option to award the Robinson Lake Lockwood Glen project as well. So 3 of these 4 are really moving into construction very shortly. Should you award that third bid in 2 weeks.
The McEwen is listed here a bit more than it really is.
Well, that's the full project.
That's
There's
the
other
full-
costs for right-of-way and
Oh,
engineering that's
that's
happened ahead of
included in
that.
that?
Yeah, that's about a $46 million construction
Okay, so
bid
that's
that you
all
awarded
encompassing.
in December.
Got it.
Again, 30 million plus of which is federal money in
Right.
that project.
Yeah, and maybe more,
Yeah, we're working on more.
maybe more.
And Columbia's not listed because we don't have any skin in that game. It's all federal and state.
Yeah, it's all
That's
federal
correct.
and state projects. We're helping facilitate the project, but it's federal and state money.
Good.
So we have nothing to cover the facilitating the project.
We're really helping organize and run it, but with the costs to the project are assigned to state and federal sources.
Let me ask, on the Franklin Middle School project for 6.6 million, what are we getting out of that?
So that is a baseball field and a softball field, which has been completed at Franklin Middle.
All right,
I
Freedom
forget-
Middle and
Freedom
Poplar
Middle,
Grove,
excuse
yeah.
me, and Poplar Grove Elementary. They use the facility part of the time. We are able to use the facility and maintain it the other part of the time. It's a I don't want to use the phrase textbook, although I do teach public administration at college. It's a textbook example of a intergovernmental partnership.
so it was a $13 million project.
Yeah, they met us dollar for dollar.
Yep.
And it upgraded those facilities significantly, both the 2 sports fields as well as facilities that support it in terms of restrooms and concession area and other things that support that area. And we share the usage as well.
The next to last block is 4 projects which are committed. New City Hall. Remember, we've shown you a range. This is the low end of that range at $102.06 million. Long Lane, Old Paytonsville Road, the modified project that was approved under Resolution 2024-46 at 28.2 million. McEwen Phase 5 at 19.8. That's a joint project with the City of Brentwood and the City of Franklin. And then Liberty Park improvements at $11.6 million. Then the final group of projects are shown on the screen. The largest is Mallory, North Royal Oaks, Liberty, improvements to Church Street, Paytonsville Road and Pratt Lane, and then a series of smaller projects on down the line. The prettiest way to show this, of course, is using the blocking on the screen. Really, what I want you to, the math in order to see it and work best is that the remaining projects, so they had $525 million in available funding. The remaining projects really total $390 million. Once you total resources, take away what we've already spent, is $390.2 million worth of expenses that we plan to spend. The changes from you last time you saw this in June are on the screen. Slight increase in the estimates for City Hall. The larger increases that we brought to you regarding Southeast Park and McEwen Phase 4 and Robinson Lake, and then a reduction actually of Paytonsville Road and Pratt Lane. That was an estimated $14 million project, but if we're able to do it faster, we can spend cash resources on that project, won't have to borrow anything, and our commitment for the city will be less. In summary, since June, you had existing resources of roughly $55.8 million. We've added just over $100 million in revenues to get to $157 million. Expenses have gone up roughly $22 million. And so the net available revenue for additional projects over the 10 years is $134.3 million. Obviously, there is more nuance that we can provide you, but it's a packed agenda, and we're not going to do that. So I will turn it over to Eric for final thoughts and Stan for any questions you may have.
Just some quick feedback, maybe if you can provide it. What I would suggest we look at is you all did some prioritization within a number of, I think it was about $87.5 million. Obviously, that number is a little higher now. Within that prioritization, though, there were several projects that there was sort of a decent consensus on. If you would like, we can sort of identify those, pull those out, and give you maybe a new number to look at and see how you assign those to other projects. We'll run that back through and just sort of confirm that you're comfortable that there's a good consensus. What I want to guard against a little bit is you were dealing with a lower number, and some of you were being really good budgeters and hitting those last dollars, and so you're putting some smaller projects in to just use your capacity. Now that we have a bigger number, you might have a different thought about how you want to assign it. And the other thing I advise you on that I would ask you to consider, we looked at replacing Fire Station 3. My advice to you is I think that can fall outside of the 10-year window. And also, that is not a project we can use facilities taxes on. We've done that with the 2 new stations. So this is really competing with road projects. In the past, the new stations kind of had a dedicated funding. You don't have that with replacement of an existing facility. So you just may want to look at that. That just gives you a little more context on that project. So we'll feed back to you where there appears to be consensus on the prioritization before, give you sort of maybe a revised number to work from, and then maybe, if you're comfortable with it, run a new prioritization and see what projects come out of that. Or you can start over with the new number. Those are the 2 paths I would look at to consider. So if you want to think about that, or you want to give quick feedback, as Michael said, we've got a pretty full agenda, but that seems to be the next steps.
Alderman Potts, and then I'll go to Alderman Barnhill. Vice Mayor Potts, excuse me.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, Eric, I like that idea. We've already done the work. It'd give us an opportunity to look at those rankings again. I would ask you, when you're referencing Fire Station 3, if you could come back and just provide the more detailed summary that we just shared, so we can understand how that funding should take place in the future.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Mine is along the same lines that I'm not necessarily looking to drop the fire station at this particular time. If you're telling me that there's more money into that budget, when I looked at it and I went up to down, but if we've got more money in there, I think that fire station is pretty significant. It is to me anyway. So I'd rather not say I wouldn't support that right now.
Okay.
But I wouldn't support not doing it.
Okay, I'd look at those needs. We'll get you
Yeah.
some more information on that.
Alderman Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'd like to look at those rankings too again. I think that's wise. Eric, when you say, or we could throw them all out and start over, are you talking about just taking all the projects and re-prioritizing the projects, every one of them?
One of your options is you've got a different number and compare against that larger number now and see how that changes your prioritization. My sense is those top projects aren't going to change. Because if they were important to you within an $87 million number, they're probably still going to be important to you within 130. But that is an option if you wanted to. So to me, there's two paths. Build off of where there's a consensus before, see what's left, or you could start with a clean
No,
sheet of paper.
I think building off the consensus is
Okay.
better because I think you're right. I think the board, prioritized what's the most important top ones. Thank you.
Alderman Baggett.
Two quick things. One, Bev's McEwen extension. I learned quick. This is where I'm still trying to grapple with the $30 million we're getting from federal funds, but in here it's $55 million. How is that
You've already spent
exposed
money
in
on-
this, our
yeah.
total capacity, but in our capacity, you've backed that out. I mean, that's where the total remaining projects includes that 30 million. This is where we always get hung
Yeah,
up.
that's always been in there. That, and those numbers that you've already spent for right-of-way and design have already been in there as well. So,
But it's 30 million. If we're getting 30 from the federal government, you've got 55 in there. That's the total
that's the
project.
total cost, but one of your revenue sources is the $30 million of federal
It's on the
grants.
revenue side.
It's on the revenue side. Yep.
Thank you.
And the detailed project sheets, which are in the big document,
Yeah.
itemize
All that.
by
You'll see
year,
Yeah.
the internal, external
So
sources.
that's not the gross, that's the net. The net ends up coming
You
out.
can see the net within each of
In
those
each.
pages. It adds up to 55 million
Yeah.
because that's the total cost of the project, of which your largest funding source is coming from the federal government.
The second thing I'll bring up, and I'd like to get, maybe not right now, but I think we need to bring up at another time, is you brought up a point about the hotel motel tax. And we are blessed to have a community where a lot of people want to come visit. And what I'm hearing is that we're, in our hotel motel tax, which is paid for by non-citizens, people who are coming here to visit, we're charging 1% less than the max that the state is allowing us to charge. I think one time that would have impacted occupancy, and so we want to make sure that we keep people coming, right? And I think when this was set, we didn't want to have too much, keep our price right. If you know anything about hotel occupancy in this town, it's that it's maxed out. That we have, and we have some hoteliers, I think, in the room.
Three of us sit on the CVB.
It's not maxed out, says Brandy. Well, I hear different things from people because it's the room rates have gone up.
Room rate, average daily room rates have
Has gone
consistently
up consistently,
Yes.
and that is an indication of supply and demand. Anyway, the point is that we've been leaving this other people paying revenue, not citizens. We're talking other people paying. 1% on a $200 a night room is how much money? You do the math, right? It's not significant to the room costs, but City of Franklin residents have not been capitalizing on the visitors that they share their town with. I know there's other special projects out here in the wherever that we have been wanting, every time this comes up, someone says, well, we got this special project coming that we want to put this 1% to. We've now sat on it now for 3 years, and that's at least $3 or $4 million, right? That we've sat on it, that people, hundreds of thousands of people have come here, they've stayed in our hotels, and we haven't collected from them what I believe is probably our fair share, because they're using our service, and I think this board should consider, when we're talking about, we're sharing our town with the visitors. Again, if this was 15 years ago and we were worried, 20 years ago, worried about people coming here, is that going to make a big difference in how many people come? All right, yeah, let's talk about it. We want people to come here. I think we need to have a discussion. If that is the case, hear from the public. Would the public does the public want us to charge those that come here the most that we can charge so they can have the amenities and the roads that they'd like? Or do they want us to keep sitting on it, waiting for this special project that's coming? I don't think we need to long-term encumber it. So it's there for said whatever possible project is out there in the wherever. But when I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this is all with no tax increases, right?
Right.
So the citizens need to understand, like, all this we're talking about is with zero revenue increases from the citizens. Except there's people coming here that are sharing our town that they could be paying 1% more. And I think we need to think about that. It's not going to the citizens, but it could really fund some of our park projects that we have in here, the smaller ones, the tourist thing. So I think we don't have to talk about it now unless it's the board's will, but I do think it needs to come up.
Well, I think you make a good point, and kind of the back of a lot of people's mind, it was always for special projects. But I think any discussion that we have, we need to include the hoteliers from their standpoint, and also CVB from their standpoint, and also have some comparables to other cities. So, Alderman Berger?
Thank you, Patrick. I don't disagree with you, but at the same time, 2020 was a really strange year for everybody. It set back a lot of planning. It set back a lot of opportunities for people to have something materialize in our city for revenue and some of the other aspects, long-term plans. So we can look at ourselves and say, also there was some state programs and state funding, state investments that could possibly partner with us if we had that 1% available to help with the state to sink it into a special project. A lot of that all got put on hold, not through anybody's fault. Everybody was in that same barrel. So I would say that as a board, because what we just went through and we're coming out of all this and trying to maneuver things better, that what's best long-term versus a shot in the arm that a 1% would give us. The 1%, if we used it in a certain way and just up that percentage, or we saved it for a special project, would that special project be a long-term revenue source versus a shot in the arm where we might misuse that in a way that, not misuse it, but use it in a different way that wouldn't be the long-term gain over a long term. And so there are things that we can look at, and I think this board's gonna be looking at them in the next year or so. And hopefully we'll move on. And for that, I just wanted to offer that.
Understood. And listen, it's $3, if the average room night's $350.
Where are you staying?
200. I'm just saying, I think it's in the 300 range.
It's below that.
200, or whatever it is, 200, okay.
149 or something like that.
150,
All right, 149, even better, thank you, Mayor. That's $1.50 extra a night. $1.50.
So you
That's
did- you
1/15 of a cocktail in their bar in the hotel lobby.
So
Well,
actually,
we're
you
leaving
didn't
that
need
revenue.
any help figuring that out, did
Yeah, I
you?
know, I had to do it, yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, but that's what that's what we're talking about here, and that's revenue that haven't been collecting, and it can actually make a difference in our budget. Thank you.
If it's okay, we'll move on, but I did want to make one comment. We have a big audience tonight, and a lot of the folks here tonight are interested in infrastructure, and I think that I'd welcome them to listen to a lot of these comments and discussion that we're having as we look at capital projects for the future and how we fund them. So we're not in a vacuum here. We're actively working on trying to make sure that we can continue to move forward with capital projects. We're going to item number 3, which is ordinance 2024-42 to rezone 13.42 acres from a state residential district to civic institutional district of property located at southwest corner of intersection of Franklin Road, McHatcher Memorial Parkway, established a public hearing on January 28th.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be concise with these comments. It is a straight zoning request for 13.42 acres from a state residential to civic institutional. I wanted to just point out that if the rezoning request to civic institutional is approved, the following uses would be allowed by right through a site plan process with the approval of the Planning Commission. So that would include cemeteries, charitable, fraternal, or social organizations, clinics, continuum of care facilities, educational facilities, entrepreneurship and innovation recreation centers, essential services, group homes, hospitals, museums, places of public assembly, and rehabilitation centers. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the ordinance 2024-42 by a vote of 7-0. And staff also recommended approval to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Thank you.
Would you like to hear, we have two public comments, if that's okay. The first one is J.W. Luna. He has 2 minutes, and then the applicant, I'll give a few extra minutes to. Mr. Luna, welcome. We've seen you before.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is J.W. Luna. I reside at 115 Hollow Court, Franklin, Tennessee, 37067. My wife, who's in the audience, and I moved to Franklin in 1987 with 2 young children. We expanded it. We doubled them by today. But the purpose of my comments today is to respectfully request that the rezoning and any other approval process underway be deferred until a detailed traffic impact analysis is completed, fully addressing all traffic concerns, carefully analyzed for the understanding of the flow of traffic, including any adverse impacts in access, scale, and traffic of the surrounding area, given that this rezoning is going from zoning for 6 to 7 houses approximately to an institution that is projected at the beginning to have 400 attendees. To proceed without this careful analysis would simply be getting the cart before the horse. Let me be perfectly clear tonight. I'm here in my personal capacity. I'm representing no one, especially I'm not here and I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of Franklin First United Methodist Church, which has the property just to the west of this. I'm here as an individual. There are 2 distinct points that I had planned to make in detail why I think would share in bolstering the efficacy of my recommendation. But the mayor told me I only had 2 minutes, so I'm taking an axe to it. So I'm cutting it as fast as I can as I go. First, I served on the 3-person subcommittee in 2006 on behalf of Franklin First United Methodist Church that purchased the property, the 107 acres that we occupy now. The other 2 members were our beloved and now deceased Chief Justice Connie Clark, and then Mayor John Schroer, and who later became Commissioner of Transportation for the state of Tennessee. Prior to closing, I walked every single inch of this property, and since closing, I've walked the property well over 100 times. That's where I get my exercise, and I've been getting it ever since. I know this property extraordinarily well. In my mind, the single most critical condition precedent to our closing on the property during our due diligence was obtaining access to McHatcher Parkway. I personally assisted greatly in obtaining that approval. I won't get in out of time to the State Historic Preservation Officer that I mentioned you, Mayor, a year or so ago, but I also participated in obtaining that approval as well. The second point that I don't have time to get into, and I have other things that I'll share with Eric Stuckey, our wonderful city manager, later, out of respect for the audience and your time. But when I moved here in 1987, I was a commissioner of personnel for the great state of Tennessee. The following year, I became the last ever commissioner of the Department of Health and Environment for the state. And then I served 4 years as the first ever commissioner of the Tennessee Department of
Thank you,
Environment
Mr.
and
Luna,
Conservation.
for your
Do I have
service.
10 more seconds? I built
No, sir,
marina
you've
state
already
parks.
gone through it.
Out of respect, thank you, and I'll share all my further comments with the city manager later. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Luna. All right, Mr. Gamble,
Thank you, Mayor.
hold yours down too.
My name is Greg Gamble, and I'm here tonight with Phil Rasmussen of Belongings Church and Mary McGowan with Kimley Horn. And I'm representing them tonight on this rezoning request. The rezoning request is for the Belongings Church. It's a small congregation, appropriate for 13 acres. I want to keep you in mind that the dedication of the scenic corridor overlay on this property, which is shown here in pink, takes up about 50% of the property. So in actuality, the developable property is around 6.5 acres in total. The access is off of Daniel McLaughlin Lane. It is a public right-of-way for the first couple of 100 feet. That Daniel McLaughlin Road is actually in the floodplain. It's below the floodplain elevation, appropriate for a parking lot for a church, not very appropriate for state residential single-family homes. Access to Mac Hatcher is limited, if not impossible. An additional access to Franklin Road, we've also been told, is going to be very unlikely. So we know that the access is going to come off of Daniel McLaughlin. We know that a traffic study is going to be required prior to the Planning Commission's review. We know that that traffic study has to be reviewed by a third-party traffic reviewer. We expect that they're going to be offset in road improvements. We're asking for a straight rezoning tonight. We're not asking for a PD with any special modification of standards or exceptions or obligations by the board. We're simply asking for the ability to rezone the property so we can move forward with this church congregation. We appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
It still has to go through historic zoning,
It
right?
does, yeah.
for
It's in the Historic Zoning Overlay, and we'll have to go through Historic Zoning Commission. Correct.
Other comments, questions? Okay, we'll continue to move forward then. Item 4, Resolution 2024-102, resolution initiating the annexation process and draft plan of services for the possible annexation of 493.87 acres located along the north and south sides of Murfreesboro Road, east of North Chapel Road, west of Trinity Road. Establish a public hearing on February the 11th, 2025. Just a quick comment for the audience that's here tonight. That February the 11th meeting, 2025, will be at the county complex. The last meeting in City Hall will be the fourth Tuesday in January. So if you show up here on February the 11th for public comment, you'll be talking to an empty building. So just a FYI. So I've got a number of public comments. Would staff like to hear from those first, or would they like to hear to the applicant? What's your preference?
We need to introduce.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm jumping way ahead. Chelsea, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, it's really okay. But just so you know, this is going to be long. So I will do my best to cruise through it. And at the end, if you have any questions, Eric, Emily, and myself are available for those questions. The property owner has submitted a request for annexation. The City of Franklin has a two-stage procedure to consider annexation requests. At this stage, no final resolution for annexation of this property is being considered. The initial stage in this process is a study of whether it's feasible or what improvements are necessary for the city to serve the property with infrastructure and city services, with the possibility of annexation in the future. The properties being studied with this request total 493.87 acres and are located near the intersection of Murfreesboro Road and North Chapel Road. These properties are non-contiguous to the city limits, but are within the city's urban growth boundary. The properties are 0.36 miles from the existing city limits, which is Poplar Farms. Much of this property, approximately 332 acres of it, is located within the Rural Reserve Design Concept, which does support single-family residential uses on minimum half-acre lots and/or institutional uses with 50% open space preservation for new development. The conservation design concept also covers a portion of the property, approximately 133 acres, along Mays Creek, which reflects land within the 100-year floodplain. There are two parcels located at the North Chapel Road and Murfreesboro intersection that have been designated with the neighborhood commercial design concept, which is approximately 21 acres. This supports a mix of active uses at key intersections that serve the surrounding neighborhoods. Any future development concepts that vary from the rural reserve and neighborhood commercial design concepts would first require an amendment to Envision Franklin Land Use Plan. At the December 12, 2024 Joint Conceptual Workshop, the applicant discussed a potential Envision Franklin amendment request to the Village Green design concept for the parcels that are currently designated as rural reserve. While the applicant has not submitted anything formally at this point, it is staff's understanding that it is the intention of the applicant to develop a plan district that would include mixed-use buildings, neighborhood commercial scaled buildings, and a variety of residential unit types throughout the development. A draft plan of service is included as an attachment. In this draft, it considers the uses contemplated for the site and provides guidance on how the city could serve the properties being studied and notes any additional infrastructure that would be required for new development. This property is in Mays Creek Drainage Basin, which is identified as a midterm priority growth area per the annexation capabilities study, which was recently updated and presented at several BOMA work sessions during the fall of 2024. The lack of sewer infrastructure in this vicinity of the UGB, the need for a new fire station in the area, and potential roadway improvements factored into the midterm design or midterm designation. In addition to a new fire and EMS station, the draft plan of services notes that the number of police officers that cover the area would need to increase, that additional fire personnel and equipment would be necessary, that additional sanitation and environmental services manpower and equipment would be needed to serve the area being studied. The applicant shall work with the city to identify an appropriate fire station site containing at least 3 acres near the intersection of SR 96 and North Chapel Road. The city should agree to the location and the land should be dedicated to the city before the issuance of any certificates of occupancy. Residential fire sprinklers shall also be required in a newly constructed home that are not served within a 5-minute average response time by the city of Franklin. The applicant should provide a fire flow report conducted by the utility district or a fire sprinkler contractor as soon as possible to help determine a baseline for the fire flow in this area and where water is available. And before issuing any certificates of occupancy, the applicant has to confirm that the presence of fire hydrants every 1,000 feet along 96 from the existing city limits to the limits of the properties requested for annexation. The property lies within the Millcrofton Utility District and would need to follow their guidance on extending water infrastructure. City sewer infrastructure would need to be extended by approximately 20,050 linear feet of force main, 6,727 linear feet of 18-inch gravity interceptor, and 5,649 linear feet of 24-inch gravity interceptor to serve the property, and extension of the necessary sewer infrastructure, which would cost approximately $45 million by staff's calculations. Depending on the timing of the development and that of the new south plant, Red Wing pump station improvements may also be required. Any infrastructure requirements, including lengths of force mains and interceptors, are approximate and subject to and dependent on the final layout and design of the development. The applicant has indicated to staff that they would like to explore utilizing an infrastructure development district under the Tennessee Residential Infrastructure Development Act of 2024 as a potential funding option for necessary infrastructure to support the development. The draft plan of services identifies that accesses will be provided to the property from Murfreesboro Road with the submittal of an access management plan. Street improvements will be needed in the area, and a traffic impact study is required to be submitted for review prior to submitting a development plan for approval. Required street improvements shall be determined as part of the traffic impact study and development plan. There are significant failures in and around the Highway 96 and I-65 interchange. This part of the city causes weekly complaints from citizens. The development of this property will increase failure, and at this time, staff is unable to support any additional development at this location until major improvements are made to the roadway infrastructure in and or around the interchange. Additionally, functional design plans have been drawn by the City of Franklin showing connectivity to the intersection of Trinity Road and Big Sky Lane. The development of this property shall incorporate this planned connection. As required per state law, an interlocal agreement with Williamson County will also be needed to provide a plan for emergency services for any interceding properties and to maintain roads and bridges comprising the primary route to the properties. In staff's analysis, there are many considerations to annexation of the properties being studied. There are both public and private investments that would need to be made to provide city infrastructure to the properties and to provide an equitable level of city services as outlined in this report and in the draft plan of services. This is consistent with staff studies from the Williamson County Growth Plan update and the Annexation Capability Study, which show that all short and midterm areas identified in Franklin's UGB require significant investment for continued growth of the city. Each growth area identified in the annexation capability study, the West Basin, the Goose Creek Basin, Mays Creek Basin, etc., present certain growth challenges. In the case of the Mays Creek Basin, the challenges include that one, its non-contiguous annexation will likely be necessary if growth is desired in this basin. Two, that the properties being studied are critical for the extension of city sewer into the Mays Creek Basin and other future annexations, and developments within the basin will likely be dependent on whether these properties are annexed into the city and are served by city sewer. And three, due to the distance from existing city facilities and city services, the Mays Creek Basin requires more investment in emergency services and SES services should growth occur there. Staff recommends that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen approve Resolution 2024-102 if BOMA would like these properties to be further studied with the intent of potentially annexing them into the city in the future. Thank you.
So let me just touch on a couple really quick things. Again, as Chelsea said at the beginning, this is about initiating a study. It is not annexation. So it's saying we want to study it to make a more informed decision. That's the crossroads that you're at right now. That's the question before you. I will say, though, and Chelsea hit on this in great detail and really hit some excellent points, this is a really complicated one. This is not a normal annexation like you've seen. We will not go do a study in a month or two and come back and you make a decision. There's a lot to this to think through. Specifically driven by the size, the location, some of these other considerations. But when I think about it from a city operations standpoint and planning standpoint, you got to look at service delivery. You got to look at land use and how it impacts that, where we're going longer term and how that relates. And then specifically, you've heard a little discussion or at least mention of the fact that infrastructure financing might be a different pathway than we've done in previous larger developments. So those are all really complicated, important topics. So you may see this in sort of iterations or components as we're putting the whole picture together. There might be pieces that we need to flesh out more specifically with the owner and think through and get feedback from you along the way so that we are studying the right things the right way. So this is I just wanted to kind of qualify that about where we are and some of the complexities. Chelsea also mentioned that there is a kind of separate but related action related to the land use plan itself and possible consideration of an amendment of that land use type to the Village Green design concept. That sort of happens at the Planning Commission, and that's their purview, but it's related to what's going on here as well. So that's just some other context that I think is really important as we consider entering into a next step in potential further study. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Berger.
Before we get too far into this and study this, talk about the study and everything, and thank you, Eric, for reiterating the fact that this is not annexation. This obligates us to nothing for annexation. And I think the board is very aware that these steps have to be taken very gingerly and long term. But thinking about the Southeast Sewer Plant and thinking about all the other things that are going on in our city and urban growth boundary and everything, is there an advantage, pro or con, are there pros or cons of the city having information, this in-depth information now, in the next 6 months or so, say in 2025, versus putting off and looking at a study 2, 3, and 4 years from now? Would this give us additional information with our infrastructure, especially sewer services and things, as we're planning out some of Jason Potts, Alderman Potts's ward too, that touches this down south and in regards to the sewer plant as well? Can you speak to that at all, or?
And we may want to touch on it too, but I think there's always a benefit to understanding how we might serve any area in our urban growth boundary. It may lead you to one. We are using the mics. Thank you. We'll see about turning it up. All right. So there's always an advantage to understanding how we might serve any area in our urban growth boundary. So that may lead you to one decision or another. It doesn't determine what your decision is, but it gives you more information to help instruct that. So I think there's always a benefit to that. I don't think anything we're doing from the South Plant standpoint drives a decision one way or another. We have that need in that capacity specifically for at least the first phase of 3 that we've put out before you as a planning option. So I think there's always a benefit to knowing more, but I don't know that it will help you just understand what it would look like. I don't know, anything to add?
This was, Mayor, this, I was going to wait on this, or did you have something else?
it's okay, I'm good.
Because it's on this subject.
Sure, go right ahead.
You're asking us later to approve a new wastewater treatment plant. But yet, staff is recommending us to deny, or that this isn't feasible, which is the gateway to 2,000 acres of our UGB. So how,
We're recommending this.
you're recommending the study, okay, but, I mean, I heard it. I mean, there are lots of, there was something you're not recommending.
Sure. So in my staff report, I also include other evaluations of the property outside of just planning. So that includes engineering's comments, that includes water and sewers comments. I tried to provide you with a comprehensive review of what was provided in the plan of service. Thank you. I appreciate that. I wasn't looking for that, but I do appreciate it. I was just trying to explain that there are some real concerns from specific areas about it. So yes, in my staff report, it does say that at this moment, specifically engineering can't support it.
Understood. So here's where, but this is what, and this, we've already done the sewer study out here, the Mays Creek sewer study. And this is
Basin, yeah.
the basin study. And you identified that this was a critical path for serving the entire rest of the basin, which was 1,500 acres, something like that, 2,000 rough. So that's a significant piece of our entire UGB, and yet I don't know, and this is really calling into question too, that maybe we need to delay the sewer decision, because if this is going nowhere and staff is recommending against that, then I don't want to put the ratepayers on the hook for a system that, when we're cutting out a fourth of the UGB.
Well, so couple points there. So first, related to the sewer plant, the new clean water treatment plant specifically, a lot of what would be treated through that plant and that would be routed to that plant is not only from this basin, but a lot of other areas of the city that are growing currently.
Right.
So that includes the Goose Creek drainage basin, moving up north as you go up Curra. I mean, there's a lot of area that does go into that. So it's not just the Mays Creek Basin. But getting down to kind of how I would sum it up is there's really kind of 2 sides to the decision that I see. And we're not necessarily advocating for either one at this point, because it is truly a growth policy decision. I don't see it as necessarily there being a right or wrong necessarily from my standpoint, but there are considerations on both sides of the coin here. And the first kind of that we really talked about is non-contiguous annexation is going to be a reality if we grow into the Mays Creek Basin. Because of the county development that already exists between the city limits and this property, there will be a essentially leapfrog into this area. It will be a satellite part of the city that may never connect to our existing city limits. And that's a reality that we need to face with this decision. This is unique. While we've done non-contiguous annexation in the past, it's been in areas where there is likelihood to connect. This, we don't really see that as a potential. Another thing with this one is that there are significant investments, as as Chelsea pointed out, in regards to sanitation and environmental services, police and fire, that we don't have in other growth areas. But when we studied the UGB with the Williamson County Growth Plan update, we talked about this basin, and we talked about it pretty significantly. Staff originally advocated that, or recommended that it may not make sense to keep it in the urban growth boundary because of the cost for those areas that I just described. However, it was the direction of the board to keep it in the UGB, and we did analyze what these services would amount to if it were to come into the city. If the decision of the board is to grow into the Mays Creek Basin, this property is essential for routing that sewer up into the basin and extending it to other properties. So you really have to look at it from both sides and really decide as a growth policy, what is the city's direction? I hope that helps.
And to be clear, I said this before, but I'm going to reiterate it. You're not dependent on developing in this area to support the first phase of the South Plant. With what you've already approved, what's already in the pipeline, and other areas of the city that are developing, you will absolutely need that capacity. And the clock is ticking on delivering that. So I would not associate this decision with that infrastructure, because you have the rest of the city that you have to think about that supports, and that need already clearly exists. So I just want to be really crystal clear on that element. And this is about something in the urban growth boundary. Ultimately, there's anticipation that it will come into the community. The question you're really looking at is when, and when does that make sense? And as we've seen in some of the other development analysis, we're being asked to grow 3 or 4 different directions in a similar time frame. And you have decisions to make and guidance to provide about what makes sense and how to stage that and what happens when and what's the right fit for both an infrastructure planning and a service delivery standpoint.
Would you like to hear from the applicant? Mr. Hines?
Good evening, Jeff Hines with Catalyst Design Group. Share a few initial thoughts here that I shared at the joint workshop we attended and spoke to some of you that were able to be there. We last had this discussion in 2018, and what I started with was what's changed today from when we last discussed this. Back then, we were talking about a planned 4-lane Highway 96, which is now in place today. Non-contiguous annexation was approved right at the end of 2018, so that's different. The one critical thing that we'll talk about a little bit further is special assessment district legislation passed the state of Tennessee within the past year. And what that provides is a funding source that pairs private-public infrastructure. And we're having a study done currently to present to you prior to our February 11th workshop that'll give you the actual numbers on that. But basically, it is a means to pay for infrastructure expansion in the areas that are somewhat remote to cities and towns' current infrastructure, and let the development capture the majority of that funding through some bond funding. So we'll give you the details on that, but that is unique. And then lastly, Envision Franklin was updated, which added some tools to the toolbox that really allows for what I think everybody at this table wants, which is at the eastern gateway into the city of Franklin, you want a quality visual development, whatever that may be, that reflects the city's characters, contains a rural nature, respects what's out there today in terms of farmsteads. And I think that's where the tool of Village Green, which requires 70% of a site to be preserved as either preserved natural area or open space, is unique. A few benefits to the city. I'll start with the one that I mentioned there, the Special Assessment District. Basically would allow this development in terms of contributions by the sale of homes coming on board to repay the monetary aspects of extending that sewer. We estimated the 40-some million amount that is in there. So that legislation was specific to residential development within the state that needed infrastructure improvements. It didn't address commercial or industrial. It is specific to residential. And as I said, Launch, which has done this in both Texas, Florida, California has had this legislation in place for some time. There's other states as well. They've done that and they're developing the study. We'll get that to you. We believe that a transition of intensity from Highway 96 and the neighborhood commercial policy at North Chapel and Highway 96 is what's appropriate. Looking at how we buffer and transition to development in that area, what's in this proposal is 700 feet of buffer of retaining farmstead along Highway 96. On the north side, on the south side, it would be less than that, but basically creating that rural nature, maintaining the entry into the city and creating that gateway that we've heard discussed in prior conversations. The fire station needs in that area. We have the school within that same kind of buffered or surrounded by that neighborhood commercial. And then expanding out is a natural little suburban village footprint that you can provide the basic commercial needs of residents where they're not getting on Highway 96 and driving all the way in, even crossing the I-65 bridge to shop for needs. I know there's one supermarket, grocery market on the east side of the I-65, but the more you can minimize those trips and keep them in an area proximal to your home, I think the better. Other part of this proposal is to look at doing independent assisted living. We're working with staff on that definition so that folks, as they move into a latter stage of life and families are there, could have those individuals able to live close by to folks in the eastern UGB. We want to develop it at an appropriate scale and intensity, and that's what Village Green does in terms of the heights of structures, the aesthetics of them, all the different aspects of the plan. And I didn't add this, but this is really a legacy development proposal by the Smith family. They owned this land for a lot of years, and this is one that they want to see it taken to fruition in a very positive way that, captures what it has been in terms of a farmstead for many years, and whatever is done on it in terms of architecture, layout. I think many of you went to Serenbe. That's kind of the model for this. A lot of the architecture there of Berry Farms to some degree is what we're talking about here. So I think the city went through a growth nature of on the north side, I just blanked on the name, but, I was part of that. And then West Haven came on board, then Berry Farms on the south. This is kind of that opportunity on the eastern major corridor into the city. So I will,
You'll wind up.
I will wind up in saying those are kind of the high points. I think certainly the staff hit on it, that if the city is looking to develop the eastern urban growth boundary at any point, this is the largest tract. The Ingraham Farm is one of the other ones. Both those two need infrastructure to ever be a viable development proposal. And I think that's what pursuing this together allows us to present to you, is an economic way to do this and to do it in a quality manner, and basically provide a vision that both the family and the city can be proud of. I'll answer any questions.
Ready.
Ready. I'm going to start out by asking 90-second comments, and that way I think we'll get everybody into that time frame. So if you'll start lining up on the podium as I call you: Israel Holiday, Dean White, Donna Clements, Maggie McCarty, and Jeff Goodspeed. And as they're coming up, we do have the county commissioners for that particular district tonight, Greg Lawrence and Pete Stresser here. And if they want to make some comments, they can let me know. And I would ask that you compress your comments, because we're only talking about initiating a study. We're not talking about the development plan or anything like that. So if you want to come up and just make, yeah, right there if you would.
And there would be a public hearing on the 11th of February.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I'm going to let the county commissioner speak first, and then we'll get you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Alderman. I just have a couple of comments about this. I know obviously you've got a lot to think about from what's just been presented to you. This is a major decision for the city of Franklin and how you want to grow in this area. Obviously, a lot of the residents here are concerned about it because this is where they live. It's been a very rural area. They love the feel of it right now. They will want to keep that feel as much as possible as the area grows. They understand it's going to grow and develop. So a couple of things, and looking at your debt tonight, I was envious of that. We'll be happy to trade with you if you like. Yeah, ours is going to be about 10 times that when we get, in a few years. And a lot of that is due to school debt. And one of the things that we're going to be concerned about with this particular development is this development, obviously, the natural place for the children to go would be Trinity Elementary. Trinity Elementary right now has 170 open seats. However, I checked with WCS, and Poplar Farms is also zoned for Trinity Elementary, and we are projecting 164 students coming out of Poplar Farms into Trinity Elementary. So Trinity is going to be full in a few years. That's going to be a big concern for us going forward with any other development in this area. Where are we going to put those students? And schools are expensive to build. It's getting very difficult for us to find land to build schools on. So that's something that needs to be taken into serious consideration on this project. But the second thing is something I have emailed all of you as a project that we're very excited about is a potential for a greenway in the East 96 corridor, which we are in the very early stages of planning on. So there's nothing that we can really discuss about it at the moment, although we have initiated discussions with the city. And Mike Madison and his team are in the process of talking with you guys about maybe the Franklin portion of it. But I do think that opens up some very exciting potential for this particular property because of, as Mr. Hines has said, this is a legacy project for the family. Well, this particular farm has been a horse farm for decades, and there's a potential that with the addition of this trail, if it does get done, that there could be an equestrian type of amenity that could be added this particular property, and maybe something along the lines of an agri-hood development, as you were doing on the west side of Franklin with the Amistad development. So just a couple of things to keep in mind as you move forward. We'll have discussions hopefully soon as we get more along. I think in 4 or 5 months we'll know a lot more about that. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your attending. Go ahead, Mr. Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the major concerns I have with even considering this study, not to mention the fact that we've already done multiple studies on this, and it just simply doesn't make sense to continue forward wasting our time and resources on this, is the sewer. This is going to be an enormous expense for the city, one that's simply not needed to determine whether this type of development, commercial center is needed, the high density and such in this particular area. This southeastern deal that's been mentioned multiple times by through the financial report seems to me, with all due respect, that we would want to concentrate our efforts with growth in areas that are contiguous. There's multiple challenges that have been mentioned with this non-contiguous situation. With all due respect, Mr. Hines, development simply does not pay
the taxes generated from the development, impact fees, et cetera, simply do not pay for development. That is a fact. And I think it's something we need to consider very seriously. Total infrastructure costs potentially could reach 400 to 500 million. If you look at roads, fire, sewer could be in the 70 to 80, even higher million range for this. Significant numbers that I believe would probably be strapped to somebody's back. I would think the taxpayers would somehow be responsible for that. And I simply think that's not what we want to do. So I would ask respectfully that you guys make the right decision and consider not continuing with this study. Thank you.
Sir, Mr. White?
Trying to get my timer down. I signed up to speak before I heard all the presentation. I know there's a lot of people here that don't want anything to happen on any of this property in this area. I tend to support concentrating if a village green concept is adopted, if the multifamily and commercial were concentrated down on 96 and kept the 70% up near my property open, I'd be very happy with that. The other thing I want to ask just very quickly is this property, my property, are all in Mays Creek Basin. We're in a situation where we can't build anything in that area right now. And I think that there needs to be some real effort taken to maybe create a special district for zoning in the Mays Creek Basin, because what y'all approved for us to go to the county and talk about, the county wouldn't even meet with us because we're not zoned. Our 23 houses are not zoned for that property. And the only thing we can really do is submit an application for a rural retreat again, which y'all don't want, I don't want, the neighbors don't want, but it's the only thing we can build. And so I think if there was some consideration to creating a special district with the concept that like oh shit.
You'll finish up.
Huh? Well, like a step sanitary system like we talked about for my 23 houses. What I
You'll go ahead and
understand.
finish up, please, Mr. White.
Yeah, I'm through. But considering grouping these people that are in the same situation and dealing with them in some way that, we can build some houses.
Donna Clements?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and
If you'll
thank
pull
you.
that down, please. Thank you.
Yes, I will need that for me. Thank you, BOMA, for serving our city so well. My name is Donna Clements. I serve on the Williamson County School Board, but I'm speaking to you tonight as a Williamson County citizen. I love this county. I've lived here for over 20 years. I've raised my 4 children here. This county is near and dear to my heart. I'm also passionate about education. And I want to be really clear. We know that residential growth doesn't pay for itself. We know that high-density development has an overwhelming impact on infrastructure, the roads, the sewer, the stormwater, and of course, the schools. I did a little research. You guys are very well aware of the Franklin Special District or Special School District. For those who aren't aware, it has 3,000 students. It serves K-8 only. And then the boundaries, this was really fascinating. The boundaries for Franklin Special District were set in the 80s by the Tennessee State Legislature. And those boundaries haven't changed. So all new annexation doesn't go to Franklin Special District. It goes to Williamson County Schools. And we're a big district. We're over 41,000. And so what we know is that this new density affects the current zoning that's been there. So again, this is full circle for me. I've been talking about growth for the last over a decade. And we know when we talk to residents here, no one wants Williamson County or Franklin to be wall-to-wall subdivisions. So please be careful. Please be careful. Thank you.
Karen Smith? Oh, I guess I didn't go ahead, Maggie McCarty. And then we'll get you in that group too.
Good evening. I'd just like to know how many here at the board actually live on the east side of of 65, and how often you drive that way. And in your Envision Franklin, you talk about Poplar Farms and all that, and how the extension of Market Street are going to help those, and also working on Wilson Pike. Well, Wilson Pike has 2 railroad tunnels, or overpass, whatever you want to call it, that are constantly, they're never going to change. People are going to wait in line to go through there. And we also have to wait in line to get to the freeway. There's some mornings where it's 45 minutes. It could be half hour. But when you leave between 7:30 and 9, you have to add a half hour to 45 minutes to your commute just to get to the freeway. And you're going to add 130 homes on 1/10 of an acre. 1/10 of an acre is smaller than most homes in Williamson County. It's 4,356 square feet. And you're going to add 1,300 homes. That's a minimum of 1,300 more cars on 96, and probably 5,200 more cars on 96. I really think that a traffic study has to be done thoroughly. And I would appreciate it if you guys would do the commute some mornings and some afternoons. I mean, this afternoon, I can't remember. I'm over at the Y, and the 8-4, no, it's not 8. Mount Hatcher is backed up from Murphyboro Road clear to the Y. Backed up, bumper to bumper. You can go out, and 96 can be backed up past Clovercroft.
You'll go ahead and finish up, please, ma'am.
So I just would like you to reconsider that. And also, look at the Envision plan. If you look at and read your Envision plan, a lot of the things that you say are severely
finish up,
limiting
please, ma'am.
and can't do are in your Envision plan.
Mr. Goodspeed.
Thank you. It's our third time up going over this property. I think a lot of the stuff has already been covered. I specifically would like to talk about fire protection. If you look at the map behind me, the flow rates for every single house in that map does not even meet the current National Fire Protection Agency flow rates for residential, matter less commercial. Residential, you want to have at least 500, which is very minimum. Commercial, you want to have at least 1,500. You don't have any of that in any of that map right there. So I'd like to know where that water is going to come from, where that pressure is going to come from, how is it that's going to happen. The Watkins Creek community, Allenton Ridge, Barrington Estates, McKay Mills, Hurstburn Park, none of them have anything more than close to 1,000. Most of them are all at 500. That's that's below minimum residential and commercial standards. Commercial standards are usually 3 times higher than a residential standard. And if you're talking about a mixed use property like you're talking about, we're talking about putting in a commercial building with residents on top of that. So I think fire protection would be one of those things we really want to consider. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Smith, and while you're coming to the podium, I'm going to call Peg Rossetti, John Morris, Bill Baderi, Janice Williams, and John Williams Jr.
Hi, my name is Karen Smith, and I live
Please
at...
come up to the microphone just a
My
minute.
name is Karen Smith, and I live at 4343 North Chapel Road. I've been a resident there for 27 years. My kids went to Trinity Elementary School, and we've very much enjoyed Williamson County. My concerns about this development is twofold. One is the floodplain, and Chelsea mentioned that earlier. There's 133 acres of floodplain land. And my second concern is the deforestation of the land next to the floodplain. Unfortunately, the floodplain and the creek doesn't stop at the Smith property line. It continues down south, paralleling North Chapel Road. The homes there are adjacent to North Chapel Road, the floodplain, the creek. At the end of North Chapel Road, the creek turns east and flows into the Harpeth River. So we have North Chapel Road and Trinity Road that experience flooding. We've had road closures because of flooding there. So That is my number one concern. My number two concern, as I mentioned, is deforestation. When you build these 3 villages, you're going to have to tear out big hardwood trees. And what does that do to the watershed? Where does the water flow go when all the trees are ripped out? So, Mayor, you mentioned that this is a fact-finding mission, so to speak. So I would request that a comprehensive, updated environmental impact study be done on this area and the surrounding areas. There are people that have lived here and their homes are here, and it's important to protect them with this type of massive development. Thank you.
Peg Rossetti? When that little bell goes off,
I'll be sure to stop. Envision Franklin declares a respectful use of land and resources and its overview of guiding principles. It assures planning practices in which natural features are irreplaceable assets of great value, and they will be protected with planning and conservation. So I have some props here. I have 2 maps. I have the east side. This is the country. And then I have the city of Franklin. And you can see a big difference in between the 2 of these, and that difference is the density. Cities have their charms. Many of us have lived in city probably one time or another. Now we're in the country, and by choice. What makes the country so irresistible is low density of population. We wanted to have the tranquility and to be aligned with nature. We are not a drive-by. Having population hidden behind a hill does not make it disappear. It will have massive impacts upon the entire unincorporated east side of Williamson County. The population density of the city of Franklin is 1,874. It is only slightly below Atlanta and Nashville. However, surprisingly, Franklin is more dense in population than Birmingham, Boston, New Haven, Connecticut, Little Rock, Columbia, South Carolina, Roanoke, Augusta, and Savannah, Georgia. What's the goal? A mega city? Please, the density is set to rise everywhere through all of your infrastructure and development projects. Please leave the Smith property in the county as a rural reserve. Thank you.
I'm John Morris. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Alderman, for your time. I'll just answer a couple things. Mr. Smith challenged just last time. Hey, he's been here 50 years. He's had this property. I'm a 47-year resident of the county. So when I moved here, the log cabin Texaco, where the MAPCO Shell station is, that was it. You drove the county and you were out in Never Never Land, so to speak. A legacy project, Mr. Heim, please. You've done 3 of these around. Why do you have to do the same thing? Do this one different if you're going to develop it. As discussed in 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, and last year, it's still hard to do it out here. The staff even agrees it's hard. Okay? A gateway to Franklin, as the team mentioned, and you finally admitted it. You guys all admitted it. It's Barry's Farm or West Haven or Fieldstone Farms. Out here, we're just doing it out east. Do something different, do it better. I mean, if you're going to do it, use large residential acre lots. That's what's out there, not 8 to 10 homes per acre. That's not what's out there. There's no commercial, there's no retail. You have a couple little areas by the church on North Chapel, but the neighbors back behind it don't need a huge commercial development back behind them. So, Mr. Smith, if you want to plan and truly honor your legacy, truly come up with a plan that's not about money, think about what all your county neighbors really want and let them help you get this thing done the way it can be done great. Not Barry's Farm with a bunch of people
You'll finish
here.
up, please. Thank you.
So that's it. That's all I got to say. Thank you very much.
Bill Verdery?
Yes, thank you.
I know.
I'm sure everybody
in here has experienced the traffic problems over there, but I want to quote from the document that was read earlier. Development of this property will increase failure at this time. Staff is unable to support any additional development at this location until major improvements are made to the roadway infrastructure. And I just don't understand how you can go ahead and recommend this change when it's so clear from your own analysis that this should not be studied. We all recognize that 96 was just improved, but if you add this development, more improvements are going to be needed, and I can't see that happening in the foreseeable future. And you know, the Poplar Farms is going to dump more people into that area, and it's also going to dump people going north. Right now, if you follow ways from anywhere east of the I-65, it often directs you through residential areas to get around the traffic problems that are already existing there. And just this Sunday, I was in the intersection at I-65 coming across Murfreesboro, and emergency vehicles pulled in behind me and could not get through. All lanes were blocked. I had to pull into the intersection at a red light to let them go through. So this is not only inconvenient, it's very dangerous to everybody.
I've got Janice Williams. You don't look like Janice. But-
Sorry, big boy, not today.
So Janice is not
She
here?
actually decided to give her time over to me or somebody else. Be quite honest, I had a little speech here, but when I look at this makes me sick. It really makes me sick that somewhere somebody decided that tall and skinny is what Franklin needed to look like. Now, you want to talk about legacy. My family's been here over 200 years. I still own 80 acres of it. I hate to say that's all I got left, but you're trying real hard to push me out. You're trying real hard to kill off all the things that you're trying to sell. You're sitting here saying that you want to have that rural feel. You want people to come in and see the hometown feeling. You're selling something you ain't got anymore. It's gone. So I'm going to ask you a question. When your term is up, are you going to live here or are you going to move to your condo in Florida? Are you going to stay? Are the rest of y'all going to stay and deal with the mess that you're dealing with that these people are pushing? I don't think you
Well,
are.
I typically don't answer questions, but Franklin is my hometown. That's where I'm going to be, and that's where my wife will be.
You know,
And I
your
don't-
hometown? Well, I'm not going to argue with you now, but I'm just saying.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay?
Next, I'm going to call up Steve Eiler, Janice Curtis. I appreciate you not doing that. Steve Eiler, Janet Curtis, and Patrick Collins.
Thank you. Feel free to interrupt because I'm here to be educated, and I don't claim to understand all of this.
What's your name, sir?
Steve Eiler. I live on North Chapel Road on 5 acres. I've probably got some floodplain problems too. And if I was to come to you and say, would you annex my property and approve a luxury hotel, because that's the most profit I can make developing it, hopefully you'd laugh at me and say, we're not going to waste a lot of our staff time studying it. We're not going to get all your neighbors up in an uproar. It's just ludicrous. And for us, this seems ludicrous. It's 4,300 square foot homes in an area where everybody has usually 2 to 30 acres. Every urban planner I've ever talked to says, if you're going to have high density, you should have it in the core of your city, or you should have it at traffic nodes that are near the interstate where people can get on and off. Now, I'm sure you can hire consultants to tell you your situation's special, but I've never talked to an urban planner that said anything different than what I said. If you disagree, please speak up. The whole thing doesn't make any sense to me. And what I'd like to understand is, who of you are getting calls from your constituents, your voters, and telling you, please move ahead and study this. This is a great idea. I'm sure there's home builders that might, and there
Yes,
might
sir.
be
Your
some
time is
consultants. Are you getting any other calls? Who's behind
Time
this?
is up, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Curtis?
My name is Janet Curtis. I live on North Chapel Road.
Pull that closer to you, please, Ms. Curtis.
Okay. I live on North Chapel Road. I had a whole speech planned out, but I'm not going to say that speech. The first thing I want to say is that you said that this is after the image of Sarin B. Well, I wanted to keep an open mind, and I took a 5-hour drive to Sarin B with a friend of mine. And she looked at me when we got there and said, we spent 5 hours in the car to come and look at this. It was the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. It was overgrown. The kids were running around and rolling down hills, and that was their playground. Now, the first piece of playground equipment. There was cement and blacktop, and everything was overgrown. Now, granted, it was the fall, I'll give them that, but there was absolutely nothing appealing to me about it. You want to have a legacy to your family? Make it into a horse farm. Let the trails come there. Let people ride their horses. Use it for saddle up. Use it for 4-H. That's a legacy. To me, all this development is a moneymaker. You are disrupting the life of everybody that lives out there. We don't want it. It's in your Envision Franklin. It's stated that it should have the character of the area. This has nothing like the character of the area. We are going to have an Arrington area plan, a Triune area plan, which will take us shopping to the west, out of Franklin, so that hopefully that will alleviate the traffic. You have to consider everything that is going on, not just this one particular project. Thank you.
Come on, Mr. Collins.
Yeah, I'm the guy who filled the thing out wrong. I'm Patrick Collins, 4458 North Chapel Road in Franklin. I bought that property in 1992, so I've witnessed much of the growth that's happened in Franklin. And frankly, I'm not a bomb thrower or set against development. But I was heartened by the report the ladies made from the city. It sounded like a prudent approach to a big issue. And I would just ask the board to forestall this, because the quality of life that we have in the space that we have is special. It's special for Franklin. It's special for people who want to come here. And it allows privacy and breath. So I was going to talk about water, but the ladies did a great job talking about that. So that's all I have to say.
Everybody turn their microphone off if it's on.
I think
if
it's
you would,
just this
please.
one. This is hot. You're good.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I know.
He can borrow him.
I guess I'll just stand way back here.
There you go.
Oh, my goodness.
You want this one?
That's all right.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Well, first of all, let me just say, man, oh man, I can literally sit, I can literally sit way back here. Thank you, Joe. All right, first of all, I'm sure I speak for everybody on this board. We appreciate all of you being here. Like, we do appreciate all of this commentary. I've met with a few of you, and the engagement is important. And just know we're listening, taking notes, and the commentary is important. There's something I do want to talk about though a little bit. And Mr. Eiler, you asked some questions, and I'm gonna answer you to some extent here, because there is a lot to figure out. This is complicated, as staff has talked about. There are some things we need to figure out. That is why we understand, we study. Things have moved. To those that have said, we've studied this before. Yeah, we've studied this before, but things have changed since then. And so understanding more so the timing of how things need to happen here within our UGB is important to us. We do have multiple growth areas, and where we do things and when we do things is important to us. Here's what I want to explain here a little bit, because I want you to understand sort of the mentality of at least what we've been trying to do here, at least over the last few years here. The county made a decision to change their zoning 1 to 5 acre, 1 to a couple acres. When the county did that, which is awesome, by the way, I think a lot of us supported that idea, keep the rural feel out in the county. What that did is it drove the growth into the municipalities. And what you're seeing is Spring Hill, Thompson Station, right now, Fairview, Franklin certainly, having to swallow the growth that's being forced on us. I can assure you, we are not driving buses to other states and cities and begging people to come here. They are coming here regardless. And so we have had to take on that growth because that growth is coming to us anyway. And because they can't find that out in the counties, we've had to figure out how are we going to take on that growth. And so we've done citizen surveys. And a few years ago, 2 of the major points that came out of that citizen survey were, 1, our Franklin citizens wanted to see a diversity of housing. They didn't want to keep seeing single family, $1 million and $2 million family homes. They wanted a diversity of housing. The second thing they wanted is a preservation of open space. Previously, the biggest design concept we had was a 50% preservation of open space and a design concept that was single family home and again, 50% open space. There was a co-creation of Village Green, and the spirit of Village Green was to preserve 70% open space and to create the preservation, or to create the diversity of housing, to solve this sort of missing middle housing that Franklin residents asked for. They were asking for, give us more options. So that you know, a lot of the traffic issues that we deal with in the city of Franklin are not actually because of the growth in the residents. 65% of the workers that work in Franklin are commuting into and out of the city of Franklin. A lot of our traffic issues are, and the people coming in and out, are because they can't live here, because the only housing we have are single family homes that are $1 million, $2 million, because we don't have housing that they can afford to live here. Young families can't move here. I got adult children, they can't afford to live here. They're still living with me, still grocery shopping in my pantry, by the way. So
one's out.
One's out, but she grocery shops in my pantry, I'm just telling you. So there was a sincere effort, okay? Notwithstanding the concerns here, I'm just trying to explain to you, there was a sincere effort to create a design concept that would preserve 70% open space and create a diversity of housing that would keep people from having to commute in and out, that would address the fact that the county made some great decisions on how they wanted to grow, that drove growth into the cities for us to have to address that growth, that would try to create balance. And if you look at, and I'm sure Alderman Bagel will talk about it, we've talked about it a lot. If you go back and listen to the last couple of years, development is down. We've just raised road impact fees. It's probably going to have a limiting effect on growth in our community, make development pay for more. We've done quite a bit actually to slow growth in our community. We've actually reduced development in this community over the last few years. But we've tried to create balance. We've tried to create smart growth in this community. Village Green was actually meant to do that. To that end, we went through a whole Envisioning Franklin process, right? A couple of us ran because Envision Franklin was up. We put Village Green in that concept. We did community meetings, we did neighborhood meetings. We went through all kinds of processes. We presented Village Green to Franklin residents. They put Village Green on that property. They said, we want Village Green on that property. It then went through multiple meetings, planning commission meetings, BOMA meetings, joint conceptual workshops. It went through an entire process. Public hearings, and there was no concern. It was all done. In the final hour of that plan getting approved, several county residents walked into this room in a planning commission meeting where a couple of planning commission members were not present, and got several planning commission members to vote to change it to rural reserve. Now, if you want to talk about disenfranchising citizens of Franklin, if you want to talk about not hearing their voice, go back and watch the meetings. It is truthful. A 1.5-year process of Envision Franklin, Village Green was placed on that property through a process that included hundreds of people involved in a process to apply that to that property. Now, if in the end of the day, Franklin residents don't want Village Green, don't want that development on that property, that's fine. That's what this process is meant to do. That's what public hearings going forward and development plans are for. That's why we're listening now. That's why we're going through a very long process to do this. That's what this is meant to accomplish. But I'm just going to tell you, that's what the intent of that design concept was to do. As we grow, I will tell you, sir, I bristled when you said Fieldstone Farms, West Haven, and Berry Farms. Absolutely not. I'm going to tell you right now, you bring that in front of here, you're not getting it in front of us. This is an Armistead. This is an Agri-Hood. This is not that. If you try to bring any one of those developments on this property, you are missing the mark of what we want out there. That is not what this is. I'm not approving a Berry Farms out there. I'm not approving a West Haven out there. I'm not approving a Fieldstone Farms out there. That's not what I want. I want 70% preserved open space, and I want something that provides a diversity of housing and an Agri-Hood setting that is recognizing what's out there today. That was the goal of what we were trying to accomplish. Now, if that changes over time, sorry, sir, you guys had your opportunity. If that changes over time, if the development plan ultimately through the process, if Franklin residents change their mind, if public hearing changes that concept, that's what it's meant to do. I've voted down plenty of development plans. There's some people in this room that'll tell you I've killed just as many projects as I've approved. But I'm telling you, that was the intent. We're trying to do it smart. We're trying to do it well. We're swallowing growth. We're doing it smartly. You may not want it out there, but growth is coming.
You're doing it to people who don't.
Sir, you had your opportunity. I'm just telling you, that was the intent. You may not agree with it.
Sir.
You may not agree with it, sir.
This is not a time for you to speak.
We may not, thank you, Mayor. We may not agree. You may want to challenge it. You may not like it. That's great. Thank you for being here. Keep the engagement going. But I'm trying to explain to you the truthful way in which this process has gone and the reason in which we're engaging and the spirit in which that design concept was brought forward. That's all I'm trying to, and that is a sincere and truthful way in which this was brought forward. I listened to you. I'm just asking you to listen to me because that is how it actually went down. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Baggett.
Thank you, Alderman Brown. Could you pull up the applicant's package and who has the computer open? The applicant's package, page 7. Excuse me, page 6 of theirs. Just want to make one thing clear. It's the map that shows the 70% conservation plan. What I've had while they pull this up, I've experienced this, is that there's been a lot of bad information out there. And this is understandable, right? And here's why. Because we're at the very, very, very front end of this. And so staff has asked the applicant to put together renderings and possibilities. Everyone needs to understand that this is not in stone, right? The way it's laid out, this is a concept because, as Mr. Collins said, that this is the prudent approach that staff is taking. That's the approach that we're taking as well. I've heard $500 million in possible infrastructure cost. That's nowhere remotely close. And this is the information out there that it does get you invigorated and get you really, tense that these city folks are doing this to us. That's nowhere remotely close to the cost of this. And what we're looking at now is to actually get a real number, get real understandings, not like pencil whipping stuff that I've been trying to figure out cost too, just like you all have. Because we're not going to put this on the backs of the taxpayers. And the thing that is different are some of these creative financial approaches to pay for that. The city has never done this before. So it would be incumbent upon us as leaders who are looking at these massive capital project, expenditures. And I apologize. That we would look at these alternative financing models that we have never had to use before. Because this is not the only place. By the way, the southeast Goose Creek area has about $150 million of roads. So it's sewer here, or it's roads down there. And guess what? That interstate intersection is not dandy either in the next 15 years. It's terrible. So we're faced with, as the city administrator said, multiple areas of the city where we're growing, and all of them have tremendous infrastructure costs. So we have to, regardless of this, what happens here, this is a problem we as a city have to figure out, no matter what happens here. We're going to look at this. First, okay, the map's up. If you have looked at a different map of this property and this development, it did not look like this. If you saw one that had the entire right half of this full of houses packed in, then you've looked at the 2018 version. It has been a common thread that I have seen when I've been communicated with and seen on various outlets, that the entire half of this and most of the left half of this was developed. I wish I had the 2018 version that you saw last compared with this one, because you will see what Alderman Brown talked about, which is we're not going to go that route. Commissioner Lawrence mentioned if y'all could do an Armistead out here. Guess how much open space Armistead had? 50%. This is 70% open space. That is a whole, on this piece of property, a whole 100 acres more. It's 100 acres more. I guess there's other math out there that I'm not aware of. 430, you said it right here, 430 total acres. That's times 7. That's 324 acres that you're looking at there, right there in the green, that is open space. How big's Harlansdale Park?
200.
200 acres. That's a whole 124 acres larger than Harlansdale Park. Of course it is in the floodplain. Yeah, not all of it. No, 133 acres are. We're not going to. Well, it'd be great to take out a lot of things. This is not a discussion. What we're going to do, the numbers are the numbers. They are. This is 130 acres. The floodplain was in the last map as well that had half of this property developed. So number one is that. Matt is right. Number two, I've seen some really interesting things said about this board, mayor, and alderman. We have pulled every single trigger at our disposal because when we ran, growth and development was an issue. We have taken away effectively this property owner's right to develop 70% of their land. If you back the floodplain out, it's 40%, whatever it is. What if someone came to your 5 acres and said, I'm going to take 2.5 of it and you can't do anything with it? That is a big ask. It is a big ask.
Just a second, Alderman Baggett.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of rumbling in the audience, and I think that's disrespectful to Alderman Baggett in trying to make his comments. The board listened very intently to what you said, and I would appreciate you not speaking and mumbling while Alderman Baggett is speaking. Thank you.
And I'll just end it. I think it's important for us, and you heard it, the passion in Alderman Brown's voice and mine. Development approvals since we've been elected are down 74% from the 3 years prior. We've approved 73% less residential units for the 3 years prior when we were elected. This is really important to us to get it right in our greenfield developments within the UGB. It has been a huge priority of ours. We are not taking this lightly. And we believe that with some of this study and understanding how we're going to handle infrastructure in our challenging places, that we have to understand that as a city. Whether or not this proceeds or doesn't proceed, we're going to hear all the comments for the next, but we have to understand, because this isn't the only place where we have critical infrastructure needs that don't make a lot of financial sense in our historical way of doing it. There are new ways, and so that's why I'll support it. But I want to make sure everyone is basing this off of facts and not using old information, and know that we don't want to see this area overrun into a West Haven as well, which this is not a West Haven. I represent West Haven. I assure you that this is not West Haven. Thank you.
Alderman Blanton, then I've got Alderman Peterson, and then Alderman Barnhill.
I don't know how loud this is going to be, so I'm going to stay back here.
Just perfect.
Great. Thank you both for your comments and your passion. I'm going to tell you that I'm very bothered just by the vibe in this room. We are the city of Franklin, and we have a code of conduct. And while we definitely are interested to know how our neighbors in the county want us to respond to them, it is not done well when we are getting your passion is coming out as rudeness. That's all I'm going to say. We do want to try to strike a balance that everybody in our community is able to live in harmony. And it needs to start in this room. It needs to start on your platforms and understanding you get more done with honey than you do vinegar. So I would just implore you to understand that we're people too. I've lived in this community for 47 years. I was 10 years old when I got here. If you don't think I've seen the growth, I've got Friday night lights out my kitchen window. So I understand. I'm very grateful to be able to raise my family in this community, and change is inevitable and it's a part of our story. I have an analogy that I've given over the course of the last 14 years of sitting in this seat. Some of you might think that's too long, but I continue to get reelected. Why I try, I don't know. People will come to us, and as Matt and Patrick referenced, there are many times, Mr. Williams, we fought your battle and you won the last time you were in this room.
Twice.
Yes, sir. And we understood and took up for you. So it's a little bit of a slap in the face for you to be so derogatory to us and our mayor when we stood beside you not too long ago. I just want you to remember that. But what I want to tell you is, when people who've come before us say, I look out my kitchen window and I see a cow, and I love my view shed, and I would too if that's what I wanted. But what people need to understand is, if that's what you want to remain, if it's not your property, you have to understand realistically it might not always be that way in perpetuity. If you want the cow out your window, you need to buy the land under its feet and maybe the cow that's sitting there. We are doing a job that is not very glamorous. It is called public servant for a reason. And so we do our best to get it right. We do listen to you. We listen to our staff, and we do the best we can to make the best decisions. This is one of those hard ones. I'm not going to lie to you. But when you talk about a legacy project, if that's something that disturbs you, 50 years of your family owning a piece of property and having your neighbors tell you, we want it to stay just like it is not fair to them either. So as we continue to drive down this road, and we will, I feel like, do our due diligence in figuring out the nuts and bolts of what the opportunities are here, I implore you to have common decency with the way you treat us publicly, socially, email, because at the end of the day, we are humans, and we want to work with you, not against you. So,
Asking us.
sir,
Nobody asked us.
Sir,
Nobody got us.
Sir.
We couldn't
Sir.
speak for anybody.
that's not appropriate.
Okay, she's gonna chastise us.
Go, continue on. Alderman Peterson, then Alderman Barnhill, then Alderman Potts, and then Alderman Berger.
There is so much to say about this, and I do have the old things that were presented before, and have compared them to what we are seeing today. So please know that some people have been looking at both, but there is so much in this that is different from other places that we were looking at. And if you, and I've driven out there many times, including one time in the last week, there are so many places in this area where there are fairly large lots built on. Especially on Trinity Road is one of them. I mean, they don't have 1 acre lots. They don't have anything that's been built like that. And I don't even notice, I'm not even sure in Watson Creek, thank you, that what size lots that they are built on. But there is so much here that is different from, what we normally see with a even a 1 acre lot. I mean, we haven't been on 1 acre lots and I don't know when. But this is different in many respects. Another way that it is different is that it has so much flood plain in it, and that would not be allowed to be built on anyway. Another thing is whenever you look at, well, first of all, not being contiguous to the city limits, the properties are, 3/10 of a mile away from the existing city limits. But it's not just that. It's whenever you start looking at some things like properties. I was just looking here. You're talking about sewer. You're talking about water, and it says city infrastructure would need to be extended by, and it says 20,000 linear feet. Basically, that's 3 3/4 mile of a force main. The gravity sewer would have to be 1 1/4 miles extended, and the gravity interceptor would be a mile, have to be extended for a mile. So just looking at that part of it and seeing, not only just this piece right here, but thinking about having to build a fire station. Actually, there's so much that would need to be added to this. It's not just like, it would be out there and then the city would not have to extend its services. In fact, even just doing the garbage pickup, would mean that it had to have extra people working for the city to do that. But as I say, there's so much out in this area. And whenever I'm looking at Trinity and Road and seeing the East Village that would just have to come out and be attached to Trinity Road, that in itself. Over in the North Village, so much of it would have to be extended to North Chapel. But the other thing is that there are so many different housing units here. Making it completely different from most anything else we're seeing in the city there. But again, the idea that we have so much that would have to be done, and it would cost so much money for us to do, and it would not all be on the development. The development would not be paying for all of that. That I have real concern. And I go back and look and see what the staff had said about it. They said, it says, the development of property, staff is unable to support any additional development at the location until major improvements are made to the roadway infrastructure in and around the interchange and so on. There is so much to this that would have a great effect. And whenever you look at the money involved, it would not be paid for by the developers at all. And I just have a great concern about seeing this.
Alderman Barnhill, you're next.
I guess I'm maybe a little bit confused. We've had a lot of discussion. The motion is whether or not we want a report to come back to us. Well, all the questions and all the comments that were made, that should be in that report. And we've spent an hour on that, or more, give or take. And number two, Eric, when we do sewer, we don't do sewer. If that project comes about, they have to put the off-site of improvements, yeah, that has to be part of their plan. The tax, and I understand what you're doing when you get up here and you speak on that microphone up there and you say the taxpayer is going to pay the sewer line. As far as I'm concerned, the taxpayer is not going to pay the sewer line. The developer will pay it. They will have an opportunity for recovery if any additional development comes onto that sewer line. But those questions like that would be answered in that report. And we're on item 4 with 13 items on the list then. That's not necessarily an issue. We are here, we should be ready to listen and make a decision one way or the other. But I will tell you this, I will certainly study an opportunity for a report to come back to us, whether it's 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. Because I think that applicant has as much right to ask as you have right to get up to the podium up there and say you don't want it, okay? I mean, I'm gonna listen to him, I've listened to you, and I've been around long enough to know that this thing has been hanging out there since 2018, 2019, 2020. It was there then. So I think we need to go forward with this, and I'll yield the floor. Oh, by the way, I don't preach on Sunday. I don't preach on Monday through Saturday, either one of those. So that's not something that I'm particularly concerned about if you think I'm preaching to you, because I'm not. I make the decisions that I think are the best decisions for the citizens of Franklin.
Vice Mayor.
Well said, Alderman Barnhill. I concur with what Alderman Barnhill just said, but before I move into my question and comment, which will be directed to staff, I want to thank my fellow alderman colleagues for their comments. I felt the same thing that y'all are sitting here as well. There's a lot of passion in the room. I respect it. I understand it. I know that as I sat here, I think I took about 4 pages worth of notes. So we're taking your comments into consideration as we do this. As Alderman Blanton pointed out, we've dealt with some very controversial issues with others that are sitting here from the county. And we want to be just as respectful as we were with those situations as we are with this one. So I'm going to come back to where I think we were supposed to be, Eric, when we opened this up, which is questions about the initial phase. This is not about moving us towards annexation and voting on that. This is just about the study. So as Alderman Barnhill just referenced sometimes, can you give us an idea of what the time frame might be for this initial phase of study?
So the first step, the first phase we're in, we'll have a public hearing on February 11th, and then it will be up for a vote whether you would like to proceed in the study, which takes you into a final plan of services at a future date. But what comes next would be an Envision Franklin Plan Amendment. That must be approved by the Planning Commission. If you initiate the annexation at the February meeting, initiate the study, then the Envision Franklin Plan Amendment could be considered at the June Planning Commission meeting. That would really be the first available opportunity for that. And then if Envision Franklin is amended to a design concept requested by the applicant, by the property owner, then we would move into a rezoning request with a development plan. And that would accompany the formal annexation request and final plan of services. Because this one is so unique, I will say there may be some added steps in that timeline that we need to address how the funding for the sewer will be completed. If there is a residential infrastructure development component to this, that is new. We have not done that before. So we probably will need to bring that forward at some work sessions for discussion in the intermediate time frame before getting to a final plan of services, because we'll want you to weigh in on just that piece before staff can finalize a plan of service. Once we get into the development plan and rezoning stage, staff will finally have a number of dwelling units proposed and a number of non-residential square footage. That will allow us to hone in on finer details of how much personnel we're talking about when it comes to sanitation, environmental services, fire, police, all of these things and equipment and different needs. Right now, we don't have the details that would come with that development plan to really hone in on those final details for the plan of service.
And so if all of those were to align, you're thinking this could be June before you would have those details?
June would just be the Envision Franklin Plan Amendment. It would then be months later, probably 2 to 4 months before we could get a final plan of services completed.
Excellent. The reason I ask that is to set expectations for everybody sitting here in the room or watching at home. And I'll close with this, and that is we want to communicate openly and transparently and provide good information rather than misinformation or hyperbole, because I've heard a little bit of that this evening, is to make sure that when you're speaking or you're speaking with your community residents, City of Franklin and county, that you're stating fact, and make sure that you're circling back as I've heard several aldermen reference previous plans. So we want to make sure that you can come to today's meeting, which is 114, and see that agenda and get the most recent information. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Berger. And while Alderman Berger's getting her thoughts collected, for the rest of the meeting, we're going to skip over to item number 8. I'm going to take a 5-minute recess
Thank you.
after you finish speaking
Thank you.
and let the consultant get set up for his report. That gives some people some time to go that maybe you want to go home now, besides us. So go ahead, Alderman Berger. The recess awaits your conclusion.
I am going to probably do something I swear I'm going to do every time, but I am going to be short this time because I
Let
think.
me get the timer.
Yeah, you go right ahead. I didn't say what short was. Could be 2 minutes, I think could be 5. But thank you. The reason I'm going to make it very short is because, gosh darn, you guys are just elegant tonight. Because you are. I love this board. We don't always agree. And we can fight tooth and nail for some things, but I so respect all of you because, and I'm sorry Greg's missing tonight.
You could respect him too, couldn't you?
I do. And we work so hard because we love the city and we want to do the best things. We want to make it a great city, and we know we've got challenges. We don't have a lock in the door. People keep moving here. And there are people who have livelihoods as developers and road improvers and whatever they do that continue to build your home and my home. And they're out there and they're earning a living. They're putting food on the table, sending their children to school, sending their kids to college and trade school, and making a living like all of us. So it all comes full circle. And I don't want to repeat the things that have been said here. There's some great things that have been said. But, and I think you channeled Margaret Martin tonight about you did, you channeled her. I think this landowner has done everything the city's asked them to do. They followed the process. And by the way, if I'm not mistaken, I think you told me one time that you're third, fourth, fifth generation here. So you all, the Smith family, have been here a long time. And I appreciate the fact that our city can work with applicants and applicants follow the process. And we respect their right to come to the city by state law now that they have to ask to be annexed in. By state law, we are permitted to annex areas that are not contiguous. So whether we like that or not, state law allows it. But the bottom line here that I just want to close with is that I had all these notes and I was going to say a lot of things tonight, but there's compelling reason to do a plan of services. And again, to reiterate what was said tonight very clearly by all of you, even Eric as well, our city administrator, that this is about a plan of services that will give us a boatload of information that's going to give us critical detail and data. I'm a data-driven person, and I like to have good, solid data in order to make informed decisions. And we can all have our opinions. We have our opinions, you all have your opinions, but great data, good study by professional engineers, professional planners, professional fire marshals, all of those people working together to put a plan of services together. And Commissioner Lawrence spoke to schools. That's critical. We need to speak to schools. We meet with our schools every quarter to talk about growth and where schools need to be planned and how we can be helpful in alerting them to what we think is going to be happening, and they're alerting us. And now I know that there are many, many empty seats in our schools throughout the county right now. I don't know how long that lasts, but Commissioner Lawrence told me the birth rate is way down compared to what it used to be here. So we don't know what's going to happen with schools, but we have to be prepared, and that has to be part of the study. So I want the study done, but that does not commit any of us to say yes to annexation, because we may see the study and say, annexation might need to wait 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or it might be able to come to fruition if all the stars align and the programs happen and the state programs happen for the landowner as well, and what's going on with the city. So there's a lot of questions, and I think a plan of services will give us a lot of great answers to allow us to be informed in making decisions going forward.
5-minute recess.
Mayor Holt,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Alderman Berger, you mentioned the birth rate. You and Ken working on that?
5-minute recess after that comment. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, as I mentioned, we're only going to consider one additional item tonight, and that is item number 8, which is the 2024 Water and Sanitary Sewer Cost of Study, Service Study and Rate Plan. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Stuckey and then Mr.
We have our team here from Hazen and our staff team. This is a follow-on to a presentation we gave you near the end of last year, looking at our cost of service overall in water and in wastewater, and looking at what that looks like in terms of supporting a first phase of our south plant and those elements, and that combination of how what you do on rates affects what you do on impact fees, and what you do on impact fees affects what you do on rates. So this gives you that outlook over a multi-year time frame, and we delve deeper into, I think, 3 or 4 different options that we had shared with you before, and would welcome some additional direction in refining that. So that's the purpose. Michelle or Fernando or whoever wants to
Yeah, I'll just
step off from there.
I'll pass it on to Fernando, but I do have this as board credit, so pay attention. There will be a test, but I'll pass it on.
Yes, you're getting credit. She's taking care of you.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Since last time, I'm going to recap a little bit of what we talked in terms of the water and sewer necessary increases to fund and make sure that the utilities are financially healthy. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the sewer scenarios, almost the same that we talked last time, just with a very small refinement. And then we're going to talk about the rates, what the rates need to be to make sure for 2026 we follow this plan. So let's go next. Last time that we talked, we mentioned and showed that for water, there was a need for about 6% increase every year from 2025 to 2031, mainly driven by the cost of water that you purchase from Harper Valley and from general just O&M and certain capital costs, but mainly to get you into a position where you have a positive net position by the end of the rate study, which is a requirement from the state. So we wanted every utility to be meeting that requirement separately and not together. So that's why water needed 6%. On sewer, it was just a little more complicated and depend pretty much on the impact fee that was going to be implemented. So regardless of that scenario, 26 and 27 needed 5.7%, mainly to make sure that your debt service coverage was above the requirement. In 2027, where it's a very high payment or very high debt service payment that year. And then it was to be designed depending on the implementation of the impact fee. So we presented 4 scenarios. We refined it a little bit this year. So the first one, which is you leave the impact fee as it is. In your code, it says that the impact fee adjusts by inflation every year. But you will need to just change one item. Instead of just regular inflation, you can put ENR, which is an inflation attached to capital costs that is slightly higher, or has been slightly higher than normal inflation. So for that, we assume 3.8%. The second scenario was what happened if you phased the fee instead of to 18,000 to 12,000 in a 5-year period? What if you do it to 18,000 in a 6-year period? Or what happens if you just next year, 2026, you implement a full fee of 18,000? So these are, again, for comparison, but next year's rate needed to be 5.7 regardless. So let's show the scenarios. So the first one shows the increase that we need every year under each one of those scenarios. So for the existing fee, just leaving that fee going up about 3.8% every year. After the 5.7 in 2027, you need about 5.3% every year. Now, towards the end of that period, that's when the construction of the plan is going to start and end, and that's when we're going to need to issue debt to fund everything. And a couple of different graphs later on, I'll show you how that's going to look. If you, instead of leaving the fee as it is, you implement a 5-year phase-in of 12,000, the annual increase decreased to 4.3% starting in 2028. If you do a 6-year to 18,000, that's 3.5%, and a full increase right away, you only need about 2.5% after that. If we look at what those increases cumulative will look like, this will be the number. So 57% on a 10-year period, 47, 40, and 32. Now, these scenarios come sometimes with risk because you need to issue that to fund some of that. But also, growth is fickle. You don't know when it's going to happen. If it stops, and you are depending on some of that impact fee. So regardless of what scenario you pick, there's usually some risk. And I'll say that in 2 years will always be good to relook at these numbers, update with actuals, look at growth again, and see where you stand. But right now, this is the plan for the next 10 years. Next, we'll show you the amount of debt that we need to issue in each scenario, mainly to fund the new wastewater treatment plant. So if the fee doesn't change, $250 million, 226 if it takes to 12,000, 198 for the 18,000 6 years, and the full increase right away of 18 is about 138. Now, the next slide I'm going to show you, and it's slightly different than the one that I showed last time, shows how much of that is rate revenue in each one of the scenarios. So as you see, we increase the rates differently in each one of those scenarios, and this is the revenue that you're going to generate from rates in that 10-year period. So it's depending on the scenario, those amount. Then, because those scenarios are related to impact fee, the next is the amount of impact fee revenues that you will generate. Under the lowest one, you generate about $80 million. Under the most aggressive will be about $217 million. I left this before like that, and I realized that if we put debt, because that is part of the funding of that, and you add it, you can see that almost every bar is about the same size. So next. So almost every bar in terms of total funding when you include that is about the same, which is consistent with the fact that the O&Ms are the same in each scenario. The total capital costs that you need to fund are the same. That service changes in the amount, but because we're issuing the debt relatively late in the period, it hasn't really started accumulating in total. So again, what happens is that the funding mix just changes. So when you issue too much debt, you need to at some point increase rates, because if not, your debt service coverage start hurting. But also, you think about, if I start issuing debt, I'm going to need more revenue in the future to pay for that debt service. So you issue that up to a point where you can just you stop and have to increase rates. So they kind of both go against each other. But in these scenarios, what happens is the funding from impact fee increases, the need from debt decreases, and again, there's risk, of course, in each one of those in terms of how much debt you issue or what happens with growth. But that's really based on the baseline scenario that we have. Those will be the funding mix in each one of those. So,
Go ahead, Alderman Barr.
Make sure I understand. There's a 30 mil, this is over how many years? 8?
this is 10 years.
10
so
years.
25, to, well,
25 to 33.
29 to 23.
Yeah. Anyway, are the charts at the bottom right? That's 9 years.
No, that's just 10 years of total revenues from that period.
All right. So, because what we've got at the bottom section is the delta. This is what our citizens are going to pay, correct? The bottom
one,
rate.
yes, under each one of the scenarios.
It's a $30 million delta between the full increase and the existing, roughly.
Correct. Yes.
So if that's that's why it's important to know if this is over 10 years or 9 or whatever it is. 9 or 10 is what it is. So that's $3 million difference to our ratepayers, depending on whether we do the full increase or the existing fee. $3 million a year. If we do the existing fee, they're going to pay $3 million more per year, in roughly. This is not going to be exact. Is the debt payment, and that's funding the debt payments of the top half of
Correct.
that.
Yes.
So next, I think about, well, so what is the impact fees are paying the debt, but the rate pay, well, on the full increase one, the impact fees paid by the development community are 217 million paying towards that debt. But it makes a $30 million delta for the ratepayer over 10 years. They're essentially paying that debt, but really at 397 million, that's paying the $253 million in debt over the 10-year period. Is that right?
So the 217 in the most aggressive scenario, that pay mainly for capital costs. Yes, like when you compare the 397, that delta is paying for some of the debt service, and it will still pay for debt service for the next 30 years after
Right.
that.
So this is just however you take it, it's a much better scenario for us. And I think we have to balance the rate impact to the citizen and also an opportunity to not go too extreme on the sewer impact fee and sewer impact fees on development. Because we have piled these on road and parkland as well. I would, and the citizens are still having to pay the lion's share on the bottom anyway. All right, you have more slides, but I just want to make sure that was clear. I wasn't viewing that wrong.
Yeah. So regardless of the scenario that after 2028, the rate increases for 2026 needs to be 6% for water and 5.7% on sewer. But before we start, I just wanted to show you, these are your 2025 rates. And I have in the first, 4 columns, water. You have a service charge by different customer classes. You have inside and outside. You have residential, commercial, multifamily. FHA is the Franklin Housing Authority, which have 80%, a 20% discount from the residential rate. You have three tiers on water. The first 1,000 gallons are included in the service charge, the same on sewer, and you have 2 tiers on sewer. So this is just so people remember. One point is that multifamily and FHA is like a multifamily because have many dwelling units. The service charge is per unit. So if you have 10 units, you pay 10 times that service charge. But you also have 10,000 gallons on your first year. So just to keep in mind. I put a note there that in 2025, the rate was changed only on the fixed service charge. The water service charge went about 8.7%. That generates only 3.2% in increase in total revenues. And for sewer was 5.5. That's going to generate only 2.1% increase. So for 2026, what options do we have in terms of rates? And when the next slide was really just a recap of when we do a study or we do a rate study, we look at the financial plan first to have that idea of long-term what you need, and then we look at 1 year, and then we decide rates for 1 year or 5, wherever. But we look individually that year to look at those rates. So right now we're going to look at what those rates need to be to recover that 5.7% for 2026. So all the scenarios I'm going to talk about are going to recover the same. It's just how do we recover that in your rates. This is one chart that sometimes I show that shows you your revenue requirements, your costs, and how are you meeting those costs in that year. So for example, for next year, there's on sewer about $17 million in O&M, $7.2 million in debt service, $20 million in capital costs, which include, I think, the design of, or the first stage of the design of the treatment plant. How are you meeting those $44 million in costs? Well, your current rates fund about 27.6. That 5.7% increase is going to generate about $1.5 million, $1.6 million more. You have miscellaneous revenues, grants. That's going to fund some of it. You have reserve, meaning you have cash on the sewer account, and some of that is gonna help fund those costs, and the rest is gonna come from development revenue. So these only assume that scenario with 3.8. I wanted to be conservative, but that's about $7 million. We're assuming about 3% growth in the sewer fund. So that's how the revenues are gonna fund all of these costs that we have. So next. This one I'm gonna go one by one, just to explain you what I have here. The first one is your existing rates. We looked at it in the previous slide. The next section is what the proposed rates need to be under this scenario. All the rates that I'm gonna show and all the scenarios are gonna recover 5.7%, are gonna achieve a 5.7% increase. So these will be the rates. The third one is just the dollar difference or dollar impact between the existing and the proposed. And the last one is just the percentage. Well, the last one is really the effective increase that each class is going to see with those increases. So when we design rates, you have a fixed charge, you have a volumetric charge. Your fixed charge is about 40% of all your revenues. 60% comes from the volumetric. So if I have many options to let's say, design rates. The first option that we're looking here will be, what if we just achieve that 5.7, only increasing the service charge? So that's the first scenario. And to do that, you need about almost 14% increase on the service charge. Effectively, when you look, for example, at residential, that's really about 6.6%. When we look total, still gonna achieve the 5.7%. So let's do next. The next thing I wanna show you is some of the impact. In this graph, this wave that we have here, that actually is very similar for every utility, for every usage pattern. What I have there is your cumulative distribution at each level of usage. So at 0, you have many, probably like 2 or 3% of a bill, sometimes just are 0. Then you start going in usage. And as you go at around 25,000, you already are around 99%. There are some outliers, but about 99% of all the bills that you send in a year, they're less than 25,000. So this helps me kind of look, when I look at impacts, how many people or how many bills am I affecting at the end of the day. So for example, if we look the median is around 4,000. Your average, which wouldn't show here, is around 6,000, but that represents around 70% of all the bills that you send in a year. So if we do the increase of just the service charge, you will need to increase the service charge on residential about $3.74%. So regardless of your usage, everyone's gonna see $3.74 in their bill regardless of their usage. Now we can look at this also not only from dollar amount but percentage amount. So what happened on the percentage is the next slide. So of course, if a person doesn't use any water, he's gonna see just $3, and that's gonna be an increase on the service charge. Next. And that's gonna be a higher percent, close to a 13.8. So as you start using more, that increase is diluted because you're not changing anything on the volume. So I'll say this is, let's say if I have one option, this will be one option in one stream. The other one is, what if I just change the volumetric charge? But before we go, I just want to point out, if you look at the effective increase for multifamily, slightly higher than some other classes, and commercial is actually less than 5%, and that's because commercial, they use a lot more, and a lot of the revenue comes from volumetric more than fixed charge. In multifamily, slightly different, so they will see actually a higher increase than the other classes, just to keep in mind. Next will be, okay, I have one scenario, all service charge. Now let's do all volumetric. As you use more, you pay more. In this case, the volumetric increase is going to be about almost 10% increase to achieve that 5.7. So here things flip a little bit. You see, commercial really the impact for commercial is more about 8%. The multifamily decrease about 3.9. Still, overall revenue requirements, we're achieving that 5.7. It's just how. This will be, let's say, the other extreme. It's just all on usage. So as you go up, your total amount goes up, but it's starting to taper down because you always have that fixed service charge, and it will, let's say, in someone that uses a really high amount of water, will be the maximum about 9.6%. So that's, as I said, I have one extreme, service charge, another extreme, volumetric. In between those two is just across the board. What if we do 5.6%? With 5.6%, everyone's seeing 5.6% in the service charge, in the volumetric, regardless of what you use, 5.7% increase. Yeah, dollar amount increases as you use more, but you're always going to see 5.7%. So I have one on one side, volumetric, on the other one fixed, on the middle, across the board. In between, there's infinite scenarios that I can run and start playing with. But please don't make me run those. I hope this makes the point that each one has their pros and cons, and in the middle is the across the board, which regardless is fairly simple to explain and to apply. So that's on sewer. Any questions so far? Because before we go on water. So if we look at your average, for example, in this one, about 7,000, the average monthly impact to a sewer customer will be about $3.73. So that's the average impact a customers will see on the sewer side. So now let's talk about water. On water, we had that 6%, slightly higher, mainly driven by your O&M costs and the fact that you buy water as a variable cost from Harper Valley. And that in order to make sure that you pay for all those costs, that we're assuming about 5%. Last year, Harper Valley, based on the rate structure, went up 5%. So that's kind of what we're assuming. If it changes, again, every 2 years, you always have to come back and revise and refine the financial plan. But the main thing here is that 6% is necessary to meet that service coverage and to make sure that that net position becomes positive after 2031. So next, that will be the next graph. So see that debt service coverage in 2026 is required that 6% to get into the necessary amount, and then it starts going up because there's no more debt, and debt service actually starts going down in water. So again, how do we do that 6% in water? It's relatively similar than what we did on sewer in terms of rate design. So we can look at it. And in this case, I have also my revenue requirements, costs and revenues, and how I'm meeting those. So for water, about $14 million are from current rates. I need about 1.3 to get that 6%. I don't have any development revenues. There's projected very low growth in the water side, and you're using a bit of reserve. But your capital costs on water are a lot lower, but you still have some debt service on it. So that's how that 6% has been achieved in the water side. So the same scenarios. In this case, I have the proposed rates, what the difference is going to be, and the percentage impact and the percentage impact in each one of those classes. On water, we have 2 more classes than sewer. We have the irrigation customers. And in this case, again, if we do only fixed service charge, we'll need about almost 15% increase, which translates into $3.18. But the same as with sewer, as you start using more, that start diluting and your percentage increase goes down. But everyone's seeing the same amount of increase. Something important with water is thinking about that your biggest bill is Harper Valley. Putting everything on the fixed charge is not the greatest because that's a variable cost. Like Harper Valley is based on the amount of water. So you should try to think in terms of balancing those costs, because that's the main driver of the cost, and it's really a variable one. So on the next one, we have, again, the other scenario. What if we just put it all in the volumetric? It needs about 10%. Still going to achieve that 6% at the end of the day. And as you use more, you pay more, and your percentage increase or your impact is going to get to probably 10% when you use a very large amount. Now, the impact to the classes slightly different, with classes that use more water having a higher impact than classes that maybe have the revenues from the service charge is higher. So that's kind of the same story as water. And of course, the last one, the middle ground. What if you do 6% across the board? Everyone sees 6% regardless, 6% on service charge, 6% on the volumetric, and dollar amount start going up as you use more. That's a 6%. For water, I run another scenario, and that is looking at irrigation. When you do a cost of service, when you look at the cost to serve, you design your system to meet peak day, peak hour, and classes like irrigation that are very seasonal, you have to plan your system to meet those demands, and that has a cost. If you didn't have irrigation, you probably could feed a system that will be smaller with less peaking, less peak day, peak hour. So when we look at costs for classes, we tend to see that irrigation costs more. Not for anything else than they peak and they're seasonal, and you have to meet in your system, you have to design your system to meet those demands. So we look at irrigation, and we saw that from a cost of service perspective, they needed to have a higher increase. So in this scenario, what I did was, what if we double, instead of 6, we double irrigation to 12? What the other classes need to have in terms of across the board increase. So in this case, still achieving 6%, irrigation goes to 12, the rest of the classes go to 5.6. So that 6% more in irrigation results in a 0.4% less for all the classes. But again, you get to about 5.5% on every other class. The other scenario, I say, what if we take it to 20%, increase in irrigation by 20%, then everyone else rates goes to 5%, 4.99, I should have rounded. But that's really, and again, in these scenarios, I just did the across the board so you can see the option, and again, an average customer in this case, about 7,000, will see about $2.65 increase on their monthly bill.
If they have the irrigation meter, a separate irrigation meter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Only for the existing irrigation customers.
So these are the scenarios in water. One thing I updated too was to show you where you are compared to your neighbors. Last time I showed you these same slides, but I updated because a lot of these utilities updated their rates either later in the fall or early in 2025. So all of this has been updated, and your rates also been updated with 2025. And you look at the sanitary sewer, it says 2024 for Franklin, but it's actually 2025. For some reason, that one didn't get updated. But again, this is the usage compared to other utilities, around 1,000 gallons for water and for sewer. So in this case, you have, you are towards the middle when we look at about 6,000 gallons, which is close to the average of the average usage. The next slide. We see you're still relatively around the middle, and when you compare to other utilities. So that's in terms of those rates. But if you think about, there's a lot of utility around that $40 to $50 range, and because that's pretty much what it costs everyone, and everyone has similar cost structures in some cases. Next slide. This was something just that I showed last time, just to keep in mind and to think about. The inflation have averaged about 2.8% annual since 2009. Water and wastewater costs, which is something that the Bureau of Labor Statistics track, has been about 5.1%. What you need is very similar, it's very consistent with the increases that we're seeing in the industry. We're seeing increases between 5 to 6%, and in some ways, you're seeing the same, like everyone else, increases between 5 and 6%, which are very normal.
Would it be safe to say then, because we're balancing the initial slides where you showed like the capital, how we're going to impact fees, and then the rate slides. So there's kind of two things. And then would it be safe to say that we are able to capture, stay in the middle of the pack as far as rate, but capture the building of a new treatment plant, 6 MGD, and still stay within the regular inflationary cost increases that we're seeing just in general?
Yes.
For that category. And so where I saw Columbia had like 100 and something on their sewer charge significantly more.
In Colombia, that one is interesting because they have like a $7 pre-treatment that I included there. I read that as everyone was paying that. But if someone from Colombia comes and tell me, no, that's only for commercial. Yeah, well, no, it will be, they have like a $7 per gallons for that. But I couldn't read if it was only commercial or not, so I assume it was for everyone. But that's the reason why that
But
one
that
comes.
statement
Yeah.
would be true, what I'm saying,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I think
yeah,
this is
yeah.
important to boil it all down, is that we are looking at increases.
Yes.
But we're also building a large facility, and we're still gonna be in the middle of the pack at this point in time.
Yes.
And our increases are in line with, looks to be almost identical to the water and sewer
Yes.
trend.
Yes, to me, that's actually a really good news is that you're going to be able to fund that plan and keep financially healthy by staying around the average inflationary increase that we're seeing on water. Yes, to me, that's a really good news, and that tells a lot about the financial stewardship of the water and wastewater department, that they've been doing a good job, that even with that in the horizon, you're not seeing double-digit increases. That's something to be actually happy about, because I've seen.
When we're looking at the water, so what is driving besides inflation for the rate increase in water?
Well, regulatory. There's been a lot of issues about PFAS, lead and copper. Some utilities have to do replacement of lead.
No. The water.
The water rates themselves.
What drives
It's
water
the purchase of water.
Up as much as we're seeing when we're not building a new plant?
It's Harper Valley. It's really that O&M cost, that's the majority of your cost. You buy water
And
directly.
inflation for the plant where we treat our own.
Yes, the inflation, but the main driver there is really 5%.
The Harpeth Valley cost, because as we get more demand overall, that's where we go to get more volume,
Yeah.
is we have to buy more. And so that does drive that cost. That surprised me a little bit that went up as consistently as it did, but that is where those numbers project out, and that's where we have to get the additional volume
So when
for
we
our
go-
customers.
So if we go to Harper Valley, we have to guarantee that we're going to buy daily a certain amount, right?
We project out what our needs are so that they can manage that, but we buy what we need. We're not buying water we don't need from them, but we have had times where we've had to shift more to them as a primary source and reduce our production because of limitations on the river and other things. So it's a trade-off that we do, and that's the demand side, and that's the best way for us to meet increased demand is by going to that source, because we are pushing production. We can do a little more production, but there are times we're limited in what we can draw from the river and then treat with our system. Is that fair?
I think it's important for the public to know that during sometimes we had water where other people didn't. So the reason why we continue to provide water in the limited amount that we do is because it stands in the gap for our residents and we have the resource available.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have the two sources, but we have a balancing of what we do to meet demands. I did ask Michelle to put this slide up because I think this is really the heart of where we need some feedback. We ran 4 kind of broad scenarios. There's obviously many we can do, but this gives you a sense of doing nothing, essentially staying where we are and maybe updating the inflationary index that we use. That's the bottom one, the dark blue. And then the others are some adjustment to the fee. That 18,000 is the maximum that's justifiable from the formulas and industry standards applied that we can get to, and we can either get there right away or we can get there in a 6-year phase-in, sort of similar to what you did with road impact. Or we said just you can do a pick of the number, assigning a cost. And this is sort of the midpoint of where we are today, and that maximum cost is that 5-year phase-in at a 12,000 per single-family unit. So I think that's where we're looking for. Is there a option that you find most attractive or the best option, or a couple options you want to see us develop further or have other dialogue on so that we can get the direction. This is, you do nothing, there's still a path to get to supporting the first phase of the plan. It's just how it affects your balance of debt versus what development helps pay for and what ratepayers pay. So I'm just looking to see if there's a place you want to hone in on of these four options or something else you would like to see.
What's the current fee? The existing fee?
The existing impact fee is just below 6,000, right?
So 6 to 12.
So it's about 6 to 12 to 18 is what we've put out there for just giving you a gauge.
My thoughts are that go ahead. No. I think I just need more time maybe for us to digest this, because it's a $180 million impact to the development community, right? Between the existing fee and the full increase immediate, the red to the purplish.
130, yeah.
80 million.
140, yeah.
140, I'm sorry. And it's a $30 million delta to the citizen, to the ratepayer. So, Delta.
Just saying.
And I think this is and we had all these conversations about, and some of us were talking property taxes to pay for these fees, and this isn't a property tax, clearly. Well, but that's.
Can't do it.
We're not gonna, but.
You only have two options.
You can't do it for this. I know. But for this is it's different than roads.
Yeah.
That's right. So I apologize. Scratch that from the minutes. Because that was misstated. But I do think there's that. I don't know what to do with that yet. That charging the $140 million to the development community on top of the other impact fees we've had for a savings of $30 million to the ratepayer over 10 years. And knowing that we just applied a significant amount of impact fee on the roads, I think it's somewhere in between. I don't know. Maybe some guidance, just knowing that that's the thought process, and maybe knowing that it's probably somewhere in between, but that we did, and I think we will hear a lot more from the development community if we tend towards the red. And just, again, thinking with the taxpayer primarily in mind here, like what is the best benefit? Because guess what? If we go to the full red, your impact fee collection on the roads is probably going to diminish, right? Because you're going to add this 18,000 full fee on the front end. And so you're not going to collect as many road impact fees that we just went through because you're adding this massive sewer. So I think the net benefit could be towards the blue on here, if nothing else, to simply not further limit some of that development where the road impact fee assumptions came from.
I think the only thing I would add to that or ask you to think about is this is a 9-year window. The difference there is you're issuing a significant $120 million more debt. You're not seeing the full impact of that debt because that's a 30-year debt that lives on. So you've issued 130 more of debt that is really ultimately comes back to the ratepayer to pay debt service on.
But I assume
so you've created a floor of increase beyond 2033 because you've got debt service obligations at a higher rate than you would have in the red scenario.
But you're not going to, I guarantee you.
You're not seeing everything.
I guarantee you're not going to come back to us and tell us we need to lower that rate on the ratepayer rate after the debt's paid off.
The debt won't be paid off till 2063. So you're right, we won't.
$217 million. That's where I'm asking. The $217 million collected over 10 years in the red scenario, 30 years, that's $660 million we'll collect in impact fees over 30 years. If you multiply this out times 3, the plant costs $300 million. So you can't really extrapolate it like you're saying. This is not $600 million worth of debt. If in the red scenario, this is 10 years.
Principal and interest, you'll get.
Well, here's some food for thought to bring back to us is understanding that over the 30-year period. I think maybe that's what it is. I like seeing the 10-year.
I think that's helpful.
But I think if I see it over the 10-year period in the impact, but if No, it's probably not that difficult to extrapolate out.
It's not, and the only thing I would
Make sure his
caveat
mic's
a lot is that after 5 years, there's so many
It's a
things that could
guesswork.
happen. You can always put it in the plan and look at how things are going to look, but sometimes I get scared after 5 to 10 years. That 10 years, 2033, is already like so difficult to know exactly what's going to happen then that yeah, we can look at 30, but what's going to show you is that you're going to need some probably inflationary increases after that regardless. What we don't know is really what that CIP is going to look in 5 to 10 years. That's really what can cause some changes. That's why I will always say, like, look at the financial plan, start with a plan in 2 or 3 years. We need to update because maybe the growth assumptions that we had doesn't really materialize or materialize even more than we thought. So I can always look. It's not a problem, but it's going to show you is that with growth and with inflationary increases under all 3 scenarios, you're going to be able to continue under very, very basic assumptions of what's going to happen after that. But I know those are going to change. In 2 or 3 years, things are going to look different for sure.
Fernando, but if you take it out to 30 years, we can show that and show what,
yes.
just assuming these numbers, right?
Yeah.
You can show that total payback, laying it out this way. If you have this much debt, the total payback is this amount over that 30-year period, right? And that way you can get a better idea what the total cost would be. Knowing that it's going to change, right? Right.
Principally, knowing, I think principally what you're saying, I hear it, I just can't get my head around it.
I think I worry about the coverage ratio, which, once we took on all the debt for the new plan, put us right on the edge of that coverage ratio. And I think I would be leaning a little bit more toward being a little more aggressive at this point, to make sure that we get there, because like you say, 5 years from now, who knows? But I think if we be a little bit more aggressive, that doesn't mean full bore aggressive. I think that would help us.
Does that mean the debt coverage ratio? Because I wasn't here when y'all
Yeah, the
did
debt
that.
coverage ratio, which is 1.25 is required by the state.
And the ratepayer it's ratepayer paid, that
Yes.
coverage, the rate has to cover that debt.
Yeah, that
So
drives some of the rate
when you're
structure.
saying aggressive, you're saying more towards the blue, purple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think that'll get us where we need to be, and then is that it? So have you got enough direction, Fernando?
We do not, but we're glad to bring more information back that could help that. I think a longer-term perspective and maybe understanding how the debt service floor plays out beyond this window might be helpful in fully understanding the dark blue, which doesn't change the impact fee calculation on the development side versus some of the other scenarios. That's what my takeaway is, that might help you differentiate these a little more.
I will say real quickly,
And maybe stay in this realm, but give you a better picture.
if I may, and I'm not trying to be Chicken Little, but I really think we have to realize as we continue to try to work on our impact fees so that we're whole, what we're doing is we're slowly pushing the development community out of our community. I've heard more than one person say, we're not going to be able to develop in Franklin anymore. And it wasn't an idle threat.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be really careful and think, okay, now we've addressed one major one, which I think we worked really diligently to try to find something we could all live with. And now we're continuing to just go down that road. And every time we tack another fee structure onto this, it pushes them further to the next community.
Right.
And so our forecasting, and we've said it before, is all for naught if we have nobody who's going to buy into it.
Right. No, totally understand, but it's also the trade-off of if you don't put it there, you put it on your ratepayer. So that's
I just wanted to say
Yep.
that out loud.
no, it's definitely something to consider.
And Eric, since you were also asking for additional guidance.
Yeah.
I feel similar to what Alderman Blanton was just saying. I've got that same concern here in about 8 years. All right, that's when the fees are going to be fully implemented on the fees that we previously passed. And then we're going to be doing these as well. And, there is that slide that it's a slippery slope right here, and I've got that concern for us once everything's fully implemented. So the analysis that you're bringing to us, I like, Patrick's idea of 10 years, but I kind of would like to see all of our fee structures as they're being implemented.
Okay, we're going to offer apologies to our audience. This is a rare thing that we ever go over this much, but we've had a lot of important stuff, so we're going to adjourn the work session, and hopefully we can get back in here at 8 o'clock.